Prologue. No one knows where it comes from. Madeline Rappaport sat at an ivory-white bench playing a matching K-Kawaii baby grand piano. This afternoon was unique, as she found an hour or two with her family's entire mansion all to herself. She could play piano, and she could play it as loud as she wished. On this day, she finished a brand new original piece. In her mere 13 years on planet Earth, she had amassed a treasure chest of talent that would have taken decades for even the most gifted players or composers to discover. Her first time playing this piece in its entirety, Madeline was just as much the audience as she was the performer. A glorious melody was placed around the core of the music like a lifelong jeweler would perfectly press diamonds onto a timeless ring. Madeline smiled. She presented a range of dynamic volume and texture throughout the piece, as if capturing all of the light and shadow on an alpine evening. Arpeggios intricately waved up and down 88 keys, her hands overlapping one another with an equal force of nature as dolphins dancing and leaping through and above water. Soon, within Madeline's mind, the binary black and white piano keys dissolved into a swirling, iridescent wind that lifted any sorrow or worry from the world. Her brown eyes softened and unfocused from the handwritten sheet music, turning up toward a nearby window. Her brain would have noticed a sunny front yard, affixed with poplar and pine trees, and a few scattered, chattering squirrels. Her eyesight was all but turned off, though. The visions within her brain were beautifully lost in music, and even a placid scene outside would prove ugly against the product of her imagination. "Keep going," a voice within her, which sounded like her, softly encouraged. Madeline kept on, obeying the friendly order. She closed her eyes and lifted her head, breathing deeply through her nose, filling her body with air and music. "This is the greatest thing you've ever written," the kind little voice whispered within her yet again. "Almost there. Let's finish this perfectly." Madeline nodded to herself as her hands kept moving over the keyboard. She was reaching the end of the piece. The music swelled into a glorious climax, pulling several melodies together into a perfectly balanced fugue. She was no longer playing piano. She was flying. She was flying, and her airplane was the entire concept of a piano, the entire possibility of what wood and wire could be. Finally, she hit the last written chord, taking her hands away from the keys, but keeping her right foot on the damper pedal until the golden tones fully dissipated. "Good. Perfect," the encouraging voice congratulated her. Madeline smiled and ran her fingers through her long brown hair. She returned to Earth, proud of what she had accomplished. Then, another voice entered her psyche. It was a different voice, one that didn't sound like her. It sounded lower and rougher. It immediately didn't sound like a friend at all. "Again, Madeline," it barked. Madeline sat up, wondering where this was coming from. A cloud passed somewhere over the mansion, and the front yard was stained with shadow. "Play it again, Madeline." Madeline felt a bit uneasy, but then slowly started flipping the pages of her sheet music back to the start of the piece. She supposed that practice did indeed make perfect, even if she had already deemed her performance as the best she could do. Hey, she had the house to herself, and her brother and the babysitter wouldn't be home for a while longer, so why not play some more? She smiled and placed her fingers back at their starting positions. "Play it again, and if you fail, even once, or play a single wrong note, then your parents will die," the new, gravelly, angry voice in her head announced. Madeline's eyes widened. She felt an electric current sweep over her scalp and neck. "That's right, Madeline. By now, they're probably in the air. Lots of planes are crashing these days. Theirs could easily be next. It's all up to you and how you play right now." The voice dripped with evil, as if it were holding a gun to everything Madeline loved. She began to breathe quickly and shallowly. Her hands trembled over the keys. Suddenly, all logic escaped out of the chimney of her mind. She thought she knew what she had to do. She nodded and began to play. The performance started perfectly yet again, but at about the halfway mark, Madeline began to picture her parents. She pictured them buckled into their airplane seats, her mother sleeping and her father reading a magazine. Then she saw her father turn to face out the cabin window at a terrible engine fire. Bird strike. She saw him wake up her mother, who sat up and screamed at the disaster. Madeline could see the plane dive down, spiraling toward the ground at a speed that should have killed her parents for merely the G-force alone. But no, her parents stayed conscious long enough to feel the blinding terror of approaching death. In her mind, she saw her parents crying and sweating and holding each other right before the moment of impact. Thud. Madeline froze. She had hit a wrong note. She couldn't breathe. She only stared down at her right hand, which still pressed the sour key, her failure ringing in her ears. Your parents are dead! Dead! Burned up and dead! How could you let this happen? It's all your fault. You should kill yourself. The angry, evil voice boomed within Madeline's brain. She slapped her hands to her ears and screamed. She screamed and stomped her feet, the painful noise echoing throughout her parents' mansion. No one knows where it comes from. Part 1. The Cave. 4 young people walked together along a forest trail, 2 in front and 2 behind. The year was approaching the end of summer, a summer that proved to be unusually pyretic. The recent weeks of sweltering heat waves had finally broken into cool relief, and so casual outdoor activity could resume. Leading the walking group was Rose Blanchard and her boyfriend, Devin Walton. They were both 22, having met in their senior year of college. They snickered playfully, always enjoying each other's company. Behind them, in almost total silence, walked Madeline Rappaport and her brother Tony. Tony held a thick book under his arm, and Madeline carried a Canon EOS R7 camera, hung around her neck, awkwardly bouncing against her chest as she kept her eyes to the gravel. Tony, 11 years old, glanced over to his older sister. He could tell she wasn't feeling well. He could sense it the moment that he and Rose and Devin had all pulled into the Rappaport mansion to pick her up to go to the park. Her irises had been red from crying. She hid it well from the others, but she couldn't hide her pain from her younger brother's all-noticing eyes. "Maddie?" he whispered, trying not to alert the couple in front of them, wanting to keep the conversation between siblings. Madeline walked on, seemingly not having heard Tony. Her eyes were to the ground, twitching rapidly. Her mouth was moving as well, although she made no noise. She was counting. Madeline had spent a better part of the afternoon in unspeakable agony. Ever since she messed up her piano performance, she had borne a weight of guilt that only murderers can understand. In her mind, her parents were dead, and now they could all only wait to hear the dreadful news about their plane crash. Rose, their babysitter, had a phone and had the parents' numbers, but with a long day of travel and spotty international signal, it would be fruitless to try and contact them until they got to the resort, where they could connect to Wi-Fi and put in a call home. They should have called by now, Madeline decided. They should have called to check in on their kids, tired from a long travel day, but excited to arrive at their resort and begin their vacation. They wouldn't call. It was already too late, Madeline told herself. They were dead, little charred pieces of their bodies floating in the South Atlantic, soon to be filling the stomachs of sharks and other carnivorous fish and birds. As she awaited the horrible news, Madeline did one of the only activities that could point her inflamed mind in a different direction. She counted. In this instance, she counted rocks along the gravel path. She counted every single rock that she could, assorting them into even-numbered groups. 8 here, 10 there. It helped, slightly. At least she could do something to even halfway distract her from the doom that this random late August Saturday had decided to present. "Maddie?" Tony raised his voice a little more this time, wanting to make sure to get a valid response from her. He tapped her on the shoulder. Rose and Devon walked on in front of them, lost in their own much nicer world. "What?" Madeline responded, not taking her eyes off of the rocks below. "Are you okay?" Tony asked. "I'm fine," she whispered. "Aren't you going to take any pictures of birds?" Tony had a bit of conviction in this question. Madeline had just recently developed a love for bird watching. "Not bird watching, it's called birding, Tony," she would argue. She routinely picked up obscure hobbies and would form her entire life around them. The only hobby that really stuck and waxed into a lifelong skill was piano. Tony would tease her about the hobbies that he found a little dorky, like her bird obsession. At his core, though, Tony loved his big sister and appreciated all of her otherworldly talents. A big sister is always a younger brother's hero, whether he ever admits it or not. Tony hated seeing his hero so troubled. "Well?" Tony repeated. "Well, what?" Madeline finally glanced toward him, throwing her eyes open briefly before returning them to the uncounted rocks. "Are you going to take pictures of birds?" Yeah, in a minute." "What are you doing? What's wrong with you?" "Nothing, Tony. I'm okay. Whatever, Maddie." Tony gave up the fight and pointed his attention back ahead, the big book under his arm. "Boy, they are quiet," Devon whispered to his girlfriend as they walked on. Rose flashed her eyes back behind them. The two siblings were indeed not talking. She never wanted to be too hands-on of a babysitter. She wanted to value their privacy and their individuality. She had known the Rappaport family most of her life and had babysat Madeline and Tony for 5 years at this point. She respected them, she liked them a lot, and she knew when and when not to intervene with their wide range of moods. "Oh, they're fine, probably just missing their parents," Rose whispered back to Devon. She gave him a tiny wink and then grabbed his hand. She thought she loved him and was preparing to let it be known to him. He was only a couple inches taller than her and a bit overweight, but he had a full head of thick hair and a very handsome face. That more than justified her infatuations. Rose herself was secretly considered by her friends to be well out of Devon's league. She had auburn hair, fair, if not extensively pale skin, and dark green eyes. Her green eyes, however, had beheld Devon and had found Devon to be beautiful. That sort of crush is heavy for a young woman and extremely hard to lift. "I gotcha. Should we talk to them, though?" Devon asked, trying not to alert the children that they were being talked about. No, it's fine, really," Rose replied, before a sudden buzzing made her jolt. Within Rose's purse came the all-too-familiar vibrating of a phone call. Rose paused her walk to take out her phone and answer it. Devon stopped as well. Behind them, Tony and Madeline also noticed. Madeline froze, both outside and in. This was it. This was the acute, violent attack she had been waiting hours for. She was so scared that she couldn't even count rocks anymore. She grabbed her left forearm with her right hand and squeezed hard enough to where she could mask her trembling. Rose raised the phone to her ear. "Hello? Oh, hey guys. All right, that's great. Oh, wow, I'm jealous. No, we're good. We're here at Hidden Lake on a hike. They're good. They're walking with me and Devon. He's good. Yep, they're good too. We just all miss you. Yes, we sure will. Yes, I do have the Capital One card. Thank you again. Okay, great. We miss you. Okay, awesome. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye." Rose turned to the children with a smile. "That was your parents. They're all safe at the resort. They said they'd call again later and check up on you." Rose turned back to a smiling Devon, and then ahead to the trail yet again, restarting the hike. "Okay, cool," Tony answered with a nod and began walking again as well. Madeline's mouth was slightly open, and she couldn't even blink. She felt a wave of relief that could have cooled over a volcanic eruption. "They're okay?" she asked up to Rose. Rose paused and turned back. "Yes, sweetie, they're fine," she said with a beautifully clean smile. "Did you bring that big camera just as a fashion statement?" Madeline looked down to her chest. She grabbed the camera with both hands. Her brain felt so soothed. The balm of good news can heal a horde of problems. She felt like she had just been given a new life. She didn't care to count rocks anymore. She felt so good. "Oh yeah, you're right." Madeline lifted the camera to her eyes and pointed them up to the trees. Tony smiled over to his big sister, happy to see her smile. "Atta girl," Rose hollered as she grabbed Devon's hand again. He gave her cheek a kiss. Madeline breathed easy as she looked into the camera and up into the canopy above. She felt a cool breeze around her, one she would have noticed a lot sooner had she not been buried in her mind. Through the lens, she saw thousands of leaves. The rare, refreshing breeze shook the leaves and even loosed a few of the browner ones. In fact, even the healthy ones showed a slight hue of yellow and orange. Yes, the entire forest whispered with the rumors of autumn. "Where are you?" Maddie whispered to herself. "Oh, they're here. I've been hearing them this whole time," Tony said, adjusting the book under his arm, which had begun to grow heavy. Tony was scrawny, and by no means a strong boy. He looked down at it as if to question why on earth he had brought it on a hike in the first place. Madeline focused through the zoomed-in scope of the forest ether, scanning for any movement. She multitasked, able to walk the trail and look above through her camera at the same time. This worked for a few yards. Suddenly, her mechanically advanced eyesight caught a swift blur of deep ocean blue fly by way up there. She let out a short gasp, just as her right foot caught a root and she almost fell all the way down to the gravel. "Crap!" she exclaimed, regaining her balance and composure. "You okay, clumsy?" Tony chuckled. Rose and Devon also noticed and turned around. "You're gonna hurt yourself if you try to walk and look through that thing at the same time, sweetie," Rose kindly remarked. "Yeah, we can stop for a rest if you all want," Devon added, his brow showing a heavy layer of sweat. "No, it's fine. Let's just keep going. I'm fine," Madeline sharply decided. Rose and Devon gave each other a wide-eyed look of half surprise and half humor. Tony shook his head and smiled. Madeline looked back up to the same tree she had just seen the burst of color at. Nothing was there now. She cursed herself within. "You failure." A low, gritty voice that Madeline hoped to never hear again scratched at her from inside her mind. She instantly felt the hairs all over her body react. Her lungs were paralyzed. "You can't even find birds. You're an absolute failure. You should kill yourself tonight when you get home." The voice barked at her like a rabid Doberman. Madeline nervously shook her head and blinked heavily. The camera shook within her frightened hands. "Maddie, look!" Tony said, and pointed over to the side of the trail where she was. Madeline shot her eyes over to a low branch. There, sitting wonderfully and beautifully, was a small bluish bird. It called to them. Its noise was a fun, sporadic little swizzle. It was a noise that Madeline had never heard before in person. To her, it sounded like somebody writing in cursive very quickly over a plastic notebook cover. "Indigo bunting!" she shouted. Everyone else stopped and looked over to where she was excitedly studying. Just as she raised the camera to get a photo, the bluish, wonderful little bird flew off, deeper into the forest off-trail. "No!" Madeline yelled. She twitched her eyes around deeper in the woods and found the bird again, resting on a higher branch just dozens of feet away from them. "Go get it, champ!" Devon encouraged. Yeah, just be careful, Maddie, Rose added. We'll be right here waiting. Madeline shook her head quickly up and down at them, her eyes wide and desperate. She took off into the woods. What are we supposed to do until she gets back? Tony asked, with less of an annoyance and more of a genuine curiosity. You, my friend, are going to tell me what that gigantic book under your arm is. Devon smiled and pointed a fleshy finger. Oh yeah, this is for summer reading. I don't know, I haven't started it yet. Tony shrugged. Isn't school like starting the week after next? Rose added with raised eyebrow. Yeah, I'll finish it by then, he said, unconvincingly. What is it? Devon asked, reaching out a hand. Tony gave him the mighty book. Oh, no way they're still making you all read this. Is this for Mr. Gardner's history class? Devon asked with a laugh. Yep, Tony responded. Wait, what is it? Rose asked for the book from Devon. Ew, what? Unusual war crimes? That's disgusting. Oh, babe, this book is gnarly, Devon snarled with a playful evil. Is it really? Tony perked up. Oh yeah, dude. You gotta start with the chapter about the long-eared bear. It is insane. Devon took the book back from Rose and started flipping through it until he came to a spot near the end. Yep, that's it. You gotta start there. That thing still haunts me to this day, dude. Devon, your nose? Rose remarked, pointing at Devon's face. A small red flow poured out of his left nostril. Oh, crap. Oops, he said, half embarrassed. He would often get nosebleeds, nothing to be concerned with, according to the doctor, but an inconvenience nevertheless. Rose reached in her purse and took out a napkin and blotted it under Devon's nose and around his mouth. Tony just watched, having been used to the occasional bleeding from Devon. I'll read that chapter tonight, Devon. Oh, dude, you won't believe it, Devon responded as Rose finished drying his blood. Devon's eyes fell to the ground, something shiny having caught his attention. Ooh, what's this? He said with the glee of a child in a toy store. He squatted down and picked up a beautiful, naturally sculpted black stone. Nice one, dude. Tony knew that Devon was always on the lookout for cool rocks. You can put it in my purse, babe, Rose suggested. Thanks. Devon turned the stone in his hand a moment longer, and then gave it to Rose, who tucked it into her white leather bag. Tony looked back into the forest toward where Madeline had gone. She's fine, Tony. Let's just give her some space. I can tell she's a little off today, and she probably needs a little alone time, Rose said with a nod. Madeline Rappaport stood at the mouth of a cave. She had tracked the indigo bunting hundreds of yards through the forest, ducking under branches and collecting several cuts from thorns and stinging nettle. The elusive bird kept evading her focused lens, sensing that it was being stalked by a potential predator. The cicadas of the late summer screamed in the trees around Madeline, but were all but mute against the incessant roaring of her inflamed thoughts. That low, serrated voice had kept telling her she was a failure, and told her that she should kill herself tonight when they got home. It told her that she had strange, violent sexual impulses toward Devon and towards Rose, and it also told her that she needed to murder her brother Tony. If she could only capture this indigo bunting on camera, then maybe the voice would cease those torments. She had followed the bird past the property line of the state park and across a railroad track, where she carefully climbed up the pale gravel and over the iron and wood, avoiding sharp debris. She ignored a sign at the tree line that read, "Private, stay out," and kept on trudging. Now, she was here, staring into a natural cavity in one of the countless bluffs in the area. Minutes before, she had seen the indigo bunting fly directly into the darkness. A moment later, she had heard what sounded like the bird in utter distress, a brief, desperate alarm, before nothing more. Something about this cave intoxicated Madeline. To the sides of the mouth were the various vandalizations of graffiti, ranging from rude quips to unintelligible gang symbols. Above the mouth, however, there was something unusual. Deep, ancient markings within the limestone decorated the area above the opening of earth. Madeline didn't recognize the language, but noticed that it must have been really old, as it looked a lot like the names and dates on the oldest gravestones in the cemetery, the ones from the 1700s. It read, Muk Akana Sijek Kori Jin Ker. Upon scanning her eyes over these ancient words, the voice within her mind changed. It became almost sweet and wholly solemn. Mercy, mercy, mercy. It was almost as if it was praying. Madeline's eyes glazed over. Love, mercy, miracle. She lowered the camera in her hand until it was held up by the nylon strap around her neck. She didn't blink, only staring deeper and deeper into the impossibly dark cave. A cool wind rustled prematurely fallen leaves. Miracle, miracle, savior. The voice grew louder between Madeline's unpierced ears. The ends of her long brown hair lifted in the breeze. Her eyes remained fixed. Savior, savior, mother, mother. God, God, God. Her inner voice was worshipping whatever lay inside this cave. Madeline, entranced, began slowly walking up to and inside the mouth, passing by a neat pile of colorful rocks just at the edge. She walked over dirt and stone until the last lights from the outside world no longer reached. Madeline had disassociated, as she tended to do when extremely overwhelmed. She never blinked. She was enveloped in total darkness, total isolation. At least, at first. Slop, 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 slop. A sound like a soaked mop slapping a wood floor sloshed out through the cave. Madeline slowly turned her head left and right. It was coming from her left, far off in a tenebrous corner of this great hole. Still in a heavy daze, she lifted the camera to her eyes. She moved a switch and put the camera into night scene mode, which would give her a burst of photographs enhanced for low lighting. She pressed the shutter button. Click, 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 click. She lowered the camera and saw the footage on her monitor. Had she been in her right mind, Madeline would have screamed at the top of her young lungs and fled the cave that very instant. Had she been there in her body at all, she would have ran and ran and ran until she collapsed. The series of photographs showed something large, hunched over what appeared to be a dead deer or a dead cow. Whatever it was reaching gangly, twisted arms into the carcass and pulling out the suet of the animal, rubbing handfuls of the globules of fat over its deeply porous skin. The final photograph showed the big creature turning and looking directly into the camera, with vertical, yellow eyes thrown open in surprise. Madeline didn't react at all. She simply lowered the camera back down and looked over in the dark corner. There, within the black, shone two yellow, vertical eyes, just like she had photographed. They started low, but then raised up as high as she believed the ceiling to the cave would go. Stomp, 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 stomp. The walls of the cave vibrated with each heavy footfall. Soon, those yellow eyes were right over Madeline, who looked up without fear. Madeline. A new voice came to Madeline's ears. A sweet voice, a woman's voice. The voice of a woman that didn't sound much older than Rose. Madeline smiled up to the pair of yellow almond eyes. Pupils as black as the cave around them pointed straight down at her. She began to feel herself being lifted up off of her feet, up to where she could stare into the yellow eyes without moving her neck. "Madeline, what do you wish?" The sweet, feminine voice cooed out to her. It sounded curious and kind. Madeline instantly found her answer. "I wish you would take the horrible darkness from my mind," she responded with pure absolution. The yellow eyes shrank slightly. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Madeline sounded terribly certain. "As you wish. Now, sleep." Madeline was lowered back to the cold dirt of the cave. She stared up at the yellow eyes, which remained fixed on her, but then the large creature turned away, stomping back to the far corner of the dark cavern. Madeline felt her own eyes becoming impossibly heavy, and she sat down on the stone floor before giving up and entirely collapsing into sleep. "Maddie, there you are!" The voice of Tony Rappaport echoed into the waking ears of Madeline. She opened her eyes. She was sitting outside of the cave, several feet from the mouth. She looked over and saw Tony, Rose, and Devin quickly approaching. She smiled. Her mind was strangely quiet. "Hey, guys," she said with a wave. Tony and Rose got to her first after a brief gallop. Rose looked winded. She breathed heavily. "You ran off, Maddie. It took us a while to find you." "Yeah, bozo, what took you so long?" Tony teased with a legitimate twinge of concern. "Did you get the bunting?" Devin shouted as he jogged up, his breath pained with cardio. He put his hands on his knees, his eyes squinted. "I got it all. How did you find me?" Madeline asked, overjoyed to see some of her favorite people in the world. She loved them. "Well, as I've told you before, your parents have trackers on all your devices, so it was pretty easy, luckily," Rose answered, flashing a look to her and Tony. "Oh yeah, that's right," Madeline happily squeaked. "Are you okay, Maddie?" Tony asked her, one of his brows raising with brotherly suspicion. "Oh, I'm great," she responded, her mind suddenly filled with light and peace. "What should we do for dinner?" "Great question," said Devin, who had finally caught his unathletic breath. He glanced over to the pile of colorful rocks just to the right of Madeline. "Ooh!" he shrieked. Eyes wide, he reached down and picked one up, black, with a hypnotic swirl of emerald green. He walked over and showed it to Rose, who nodded. Devin slipped the stone into Rose's purse. "Let's get out of here, kiddos," Rose said, and walked over to put an arm around Madeline. Together, the four young people made their way out of the park and to the car. Madeline smiled up at the forest canopy the entire time, lost in her own happy world. No one knows where it comes from. Part 2. The Shadow. The day melted into a pleasant evening over the Rappaport mansion. An almost full moon glowed above. The sturgeon moon was next, Devin pointed out as they made their way through the tall front gate. A fog rested over the moistened grounds, its pale color accentuated on this unusually bright night. The four young people went to their respective quarters, cleaned up, got dressed, and all congregated for dinner in the mansion's kitchen and dining area, which could have easily passed as an upscale hotel lobby. Food was ordered and delivered from 2 different local restaurants, a big thanks to Mr. and Mrs. Rappaport's credit card. And so, Rose, Devin, Tony, and Madeline all shared a lovely meal together. Madeline was especially bubbly, laughing at Devin's jokes and finishing her entire takeout bowl of spicy pad thai. Tony was in high spirits as well, especially enjoying seeing his sister so calm and funny. His own meatball sub didn't stand a chance. Rose always made it a point to try and give each child equal attention, so she asked Tony all about his summer hockey league and about what he looked forward to in the new school year. She then turned to Madeline, who sat with a sunny smile. So, Madeline, I hear you're already getting letters from Juilliard. Rose lifted her perfectly groomed eyebrows and placed a napkin over her vegetarian ramen. Oh, yeah, I guess that's right, Madeline answered with a nod. Tony looked at her with a bit of surprise at her response. Rose noticed the casual tone in which Madeline talked about her dream school. Well, would you like to play something for us that you've composed recently? We always love it when you serenade us, Rose said, gently coaxing the girl and nudging Devon, who was diving into his second meatball sub. Devon chewed quickly, swallowed, and gave a, "Hear, hear." Madeline paused and looked down at the large mahogany table. Strangely, playing piano was the last thing in the world she wanted to do. No thanks, that's okay. I think I just want to go to bed," she answered with a smile and began to pick up her dishes. Devon and Tony shared a look. "Maddie, come on," Tony asked. "That's okay, maybe tomorrow." Madeline walked over to the sink, placed in her silverware, and threw away her takeout bowl. "Good night, everyone. Today was so lovely, thank you," she sweetly regaled before leaving the dining area off toward her and her brother's wing of the mansion. The three remaining all looked at each other with puzzled expressions. "That's not very like her," Devon whispered, wiping marinara sauce off of his mouth. "Huh. Oh well. Tony, feel free to run off too, I guess, if you're tired of hanging out with the old people." Rose flashed a sarcastic smile at Tony, who remained off-put by Madeline's behavior. "Okay. I have some reading to do." Tony went and did his dishes quickly. "Good night, guys." He waved as he passed by the table and off into the dark hallways toward his room. Rose and Devon waved back. "Interesting couple of kids," Devon said. "Is it about time for a trip to the cellar?" "Oh, yes. I'll grab one. You always grab the most expensive bottle they got." Rose rolled her eyes and squeezed Devon's left arm. "I mean, babe, they're loaded, like they care." Rose walked through the kitchen and over to a door that led down to the wine cellar. She creaked it open and started down the stairs, but then paused. All of the walls of the stairwell were made of lacquered pinewood paneling, covered in dark brown spots of sap stain. 3 of these large dots caught Rose's attention. In her mind, they formed a face. In her eyes, she saw a howling, tortured face that silently screamed at her with a proportionally cavernous mouth. Her eyes unfocused, and she went into a daze. She just stared at the wood spots from the top of the stairs for almost a full 2 minutes. She just couldn't shake the mental image of that howling, hungry face. She thought she began to see it move. "She knows we have it!" A booming voice erupted behind her, breaking her from her hypnosis. She jumped, miraculously grabbing the rail and not tumbling down the stairs. "What?" she yelled, and turned around to face a bewildered Devon. "You just want me to grab it? That's all I said," he replied sheepishly. "Oh, yeah, sure. I'm just gonna go lay down for a minute." She went up and past a confused Devon, who shrugged and made his way down the stairs into the dark wine cellar. He sort of knew his way around the room, which was the size of most liquor stores. He didn't bother turning on the light, trusting that whatever bottle he chose would be some of the best wine he had ever drank. He reached down and felt a tube of dusty glass. Slop. Devon froze. He thought he had heard something in the dark cellar, somewhere further down the rows of bottles and barrels. His breath stopped so he could listen better. After a few seconds of silence, he resumed his task, shaking off the momentary scare, although hurrying himself back up the stairs to the main floor of the mansion. Meanwhile, in the east wing of the house where the children stayed, rooms far apart but connected by a long hallway, Tony found himself buried in a large book titled Unusual War Crimes. He laid in bed, a small flashlight tucked under his chin as he turned pages. He was reading the chapter that Devon had recommended, and was learning all about the long-eared bear. A frightful affair. Tony could only stretch wide eyes at the horrible story that opened before him. Apparently, toward the end of World War II, the Russians had experimented with prisoners of war, although evidence went purposefully underdocumented. One such case involved a Russian army deserter who had fled from a battlefield in Belarus, soon to be captured by his former comrades. Deep within the bowels of Russian military complexes, this deserter was held and tortured by one Dr. Kovarny. Kovarny believed within his amphetamine-sizzled mind that the war could be won, as could all other wars, as soon as Russia developed what he called the Super Soldat, or a league of super soldiers. Wanting to use the Russian prisoner for his strong stock, but not wanting to take lightly the treasonous act of desertion, Dr. Kovarny went to his brutal work. Kovarny threw the prisoner into an industrial oven and baked him alive, making sure to open the small window every few minutes to make eye contact with the screaming, cooking man. After the prisoner was well done, Kovarny surgically removed the brain and eyes of the body and implanted them into the head of a Kamchatka brown bear that had also been captured and killed. The super soldat must have the strongest brain, the sharpest eyes and ears, and the mightiest body, a drug-addled Dr. Kovarny would command over his assistants as they cut and sewed and mixed together pieces of man and beast. The final touch involved removing the bear's ears and replacing them with the long ears of a Russian hare, gruesomely stitching them into place on top of the bear's head. Kovarny was able to sit back and see the full grotesque glory of his monstrous creation. Reports within Unusual War Crimes gave a mixed account of what actually happened with the long-eared bear. Some say that, of course, the brain and eyes of the baked prisoner never took with the physiognomy of the brown bear. The bear never regained life, even with electric shock. Other, more obscure findings of the experiment told a different story. They recalled Dr. Kovarny toiling over the great body of the long-eared bear, shocking and shocking it until finally it woke up. They say it sat up, its half-boiled man's eyes training right on Kovarny. They say its hare's ears stood erect as the beast sat up, shook its head, and immediately attacked the treacherous Russian doctor. They say it roared and swiped giant claws all over the doctor's face and chest, all the while getting sprayed by machine gun fire from nearby soldiers, taking the bullets like a T-34 tank. Reports say the bear picked up a howling Dr. Kovarny and walked over to the same industrial oven that had killed the POW and threw in the doctor, slamming the door shut and cranking the heat up until the knob broke. The doctor's screams were reported to wail out through the door of the oven, and the long-eared bear opened its great arms, taking in hundreds more bullets, until finally it collapsed. Reports say that upon approaching the great monster, a human-like moan escaped from its jaws, and right before the final bullet to the skull, one word was softly muttered. Ma, ma. Tony slammed his book shut, his skin tingling with fright and disturbance. What was wrong with Devon for recommending such a horrid story? In fact, what was wrong with his school for assigning a book so heinous? Tony threw the book on his bedroom floor and looked up and out the window, just in time to see a great shadow pass by the Rappaport mansion. It didn't resemble the shadow of a bird in the moonlight. It was a thick, slow shadow. Tony turned his unease out of the book and toward his real-life moment. What was that? He looked at the clock. 12:13. He scoffed and realized he needed to sleep well before his hockey game the next day. He dove under the covers and led a splotchy night's sleep, troubled by dark dreams. Rose had gone off through the courtyard over to the guest house that stood near the main house. She had laid down, trying to shake off the daze she had fallen into since becoming lost in the faces of the pine paneling of the stairwell earlier. Sleep had not come easily, especially since Devon had not joined her in bed yet. She stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then, after what felt like days of staring, Rose saw a large shadow passing across the ceiling of her guest cottage. This startled her, and her eyes followed the shadow all the way across the ceiling and out of the cottage. The light of the lamp by her bedside had dimmed upon the shadow's passing, as if penetrating and stifling even electric light. She remained puzzled until, at long last, sleep took her. Devon was in the main living room near the dining area, almost fully finished with a bottle of Chateau Lafite Rothschild Bordeaux wine and half a quart of Rocky Road ice cream. He was gaming on a 95-inch television screen, as he loved doing any time he visited the Rappaports. At one point, a shadow passed right over the screen and took his focus off of his game, making him throw his hands up and half-drunkenly slur out curses. He shook it off, took the last big swig of expensive wine, and restarted his game. Madeline had gone right to bed, her mind light and unbothered. She sweetly and comfortably snugged into the covers after clicking off her bedside lamp. She slept deeply and instantly, in a way that she didn't remember ever having slept before. She had no dreams, and therefore no nightmares. The dark shadow that passed through Madeline's room and directly into her closet went completely unnoticed. Part 3. The Attack. The following day, a Sunday, started unremarkably. Devon had gotten up early, delightedly not hungover. That's why you drink the good stuff, he told himself, and headed off to do some chores down at his own family's house, which wasn't even 3 miles down the road from the Rappaports. Rose had slept well, and had walked all the way to the kitchen to make coffee and get out some danishes from the fridge for the children's breakfast. She then had walked over to the children's wing of the mansion and rapped on Tony's door. Tony jostled, wiped the sleep and the nightmares from his eyes, gathered his hockey gear, and followed Rose to breakfast, and then with her onto the local ice center, where his team was to have a pickup game. Madeline, once again, had the entire mansion to herself for a few hours. She slept in and glowed the entire morning with the sheen of a restful night. She was chewing on a raspberry Danish in the kitchen when her eyes fell over to the ivory-white K. Kawai baby grand piano that she had spent so many thousands of hours playing. She nodded to herself, finished breakfast, and walked over and planted on the bench. She looked down at the keys. Strangely, all of the black and white punched up strange and foreign to her eyes. What? She placed her hands on the keyboard, somehow not knowing where to rest each finger or how far to reach from thumb to pinky. She looked up and arranged the sheet music on the stand. She read over it. It may as well have been Romanian runes. She puzzled deeply, but didn't panic. She pressed her fingers down on the keys, and a clunky, misshapen noise banged out. She wasn't playing the right notes at all. She scoffed, before ringing out a girlish giggle. "Piano is so silly," she heard herself say, before closing the cover of the keyboard and walking away from the baby grand. She spent the next few hours watching a stupid television show about idiots competing for love in the tropics. Once again, the day swiveled into night as the 4 young people reconvened around the dinner table, recounting the day's activities. Tony's team, the Ice Flyers, had won their scrimmage and were shaping up to be very competitive for when the regular season started in the fall. He had even scored a goal. Madeline shared about how she had played piano and watched television, again shying away from giving the others a concert, to their muted chagrin. During dinner, Madeline and Tony's parents had called Rose, and so everyone got to talk over the phone. After plates were cleaned, the children excused themselves to their wing, and so the group split up for the night. Madeline climbed into bed, once again feeling the warm wash of sleepiness cover her. Her mind was so shiny, so simple. She loved it. She loved not concerning herself with deep matters, her life only serving as a vessel of comfort. It was easy. She closed her eyes and began to drift off. Right before she took the plunge into sleep, a rustling noise snapped her eyes back open. All was dark in her room, but she heard something knocking around in her closet. She sat up and pushed her head forward to try and get a better look in the blackness. As she did, the double doors of her closet slowly creaked open to reveal a wide column of deep shadow. Madeline rubbed her eyes, somehow not frightened, only curious. On the doors to the left and right, Madeline could make out two gigantic, claw-like hands holding everything open. Then, in the very middle of the column of darkness within the closet, two tall, vertical, almond-like eyes opened yellow and seething, right below the ceiling. "Madeline," it called softly, the same woman-like tone wafting out to the bed. Madeline's eyes didn't blink. She simply waited. "Madeline!" The voice within the closet changed from soft to roaring, holding an ancient and devastating rage. The boom of this shouted word shook the entire room. Way down the hall, even Tony was half awakened, turning in his own bed. Madeline felt a pang of fear, like she thought she had forgotten. "Thief!" The grating, low voice growled in the dark of the closet. The yellow eyes shrank into molten daggers. "What do you mean, thief?" Madeline innocently inquired, having subconsciously raised her comforter to her chin. The yellow eyes in the closet eased and opened back up to their original size. The eyes studied Madeline up and down, pausing for consideration, as if reading her mind. "It's in this house. I know." The voice returned to a lower, feminine timbre. "I will find it, and I will take back much more than was stolen." Madeline turned her face in confusion, keeping the covers under her face. "But first," the voice said with a teasing tone. The yellow eyes lowered again and trained two midnight pupils on Madeline like an executioner handing out his judgment. One of the claw-like hands released the closet door and stretched slowly across the room and over the bed to Madeline's face, although the rest of the creature's body remained in the darkness of the closet. Madeline followed the claw with her eyes as it approached her face and stopped just short of her nose. The claw gave a wet, gritty snap, like a lighter trying to ignite in a rainstorm. The claw then dropped on top of the covers over Madeline's chest, and the entire arm retreated back to the closet, like a rapidly retracting fire hose. One of the yellow eyes winked at Madeline, then both doors of the closet were pulled shut with a ferocious bang, pulling off the left side from its hinges. Madeline shivered under her covers, once again alone in the dark. Then, something within her changed. No, not changed. Reverted. The hibernating snakes in her brain thawed and began to slither and hiss once more. She began to tremble. "You're doomed. It's time to end your life, Madeline." A familiar, yet horrible thought projected across her psyche. Madeline's eyes twitched. "You'll never get rid of me unless you kill yourself." Tony snapped out of sleep. Yes, that boom was real. He was not dreaming. He scanned over his dark room, the only source of any low light being his window, which brought in reflected rays from a now full moon. He slowly crawled out of bed and walked over to his door. He gently creaked it open, easing one eye over to the crack and peering down the long, dark hallway that separated his and Madeline's rooms. Nothing down there except pungent shadow. His breath shallow, He then decided to walk over and check out the window. He approached it and got up on his toes to see out. His eyes flew open, and he was instantly wide awake, a surge of adrenaline entering his body like a needle to the heart. There was something on the front lawn, in the moonlight, down on all fours, and then raising up on two legs. It looked big. At full height, it had to be at least 10 feet. The shadows of two tall ears topped its wide head. Pale, glowing eyes decorated its otherwise dark face. Only one thought crossed Tony's young mind. "No!" he whispered, screamed. He shut the thin curtains and ran back to his bed and flew under the covers. He shivered there for a couple of minutes, wondering if he was still dreaming. Having lost the ability to fall asleep, he decided, at long last, to walk back over and look out the window again, hopefully proving his late-night eyes to be unreliable narrators. He lowered the blankets from his head. In the window, behind the curtain, a large, round shadow pressed in, with two glowing eyes piercing the dark and fixed right on Tony. Whatever that thing was, it had somehow climbed up the wall and was now looking into his bedroom. Tony screamed and ran over to his closet, slamming the door shut. He got down on his knees and listened. He thought he could hear clacking and woofing and chuffing from outside his window. Then, all went silent. Tony remained in the dark of his closet, breathing rapidly and not blinking for what seemed like hours. Then, he heard his bedroom door being roughly opened. He gasped and threw himself to the back wall of the closet. Ouch! He felt himself hit his hockey gear that he had packed away earlier. The stick. He grabbed the stick and placed it against the closet door under the back of a knob to help keep it closed. He held both hands against it and pressed tight. Heavy footsteps boomed across his bedroom, and then he heard a sharp swipe on his closet door. He heard baying and growling. Another swipe. Tony's mind scrambled. He looked around the dark of the closet, trying to remember if there was anything in here that he could use to defend himself. His skates. The blade of his hockey skates. He kept one arm on the stick against the back of the door and reached the other hand back and grabbed one of his sharp-bladed skates. He put his whole hand into it, ignoring the smell of the recent game, and wielded it like a dagger. His heart raced. He needed to summon some bravery. Madeline. He had to protect Madeline and the others from whatever this thing was. He shuddered a quick nod to himself and waited for this thing to make a move. Then, he heard the strangest noise he would ever hear in his life. Ma. Ma. A low, heavy voice called out from the other side of the closet door. Tony paused. The entire door ripped open, decimating it and even taking and snapping the hockey stick. Tony fell back. There, in his room, on two legs now, stood a large, strange bear in the full moonlight. Stitched-on, long ears stood tall, and its jaw hung open as if dislocated. Two half-boiled white eyes glowed down, pinpointing Tony. It raised a fleshy, razor-clawed paw. For Madeline, for the others, for his family's home. Tony got up and raged over to the beast and sliced his hockey skate across its face, catching it on its upper lip and severing through its nose, popping an eyeball like an over-easy egg, and removing one of its long ears. The bear roared in pain, bringing up a paw to its mutilated face. Tony raised his skate once again to attack. The bear roared an embarrassed, cowardly warning, keeping a paw to its sliced eye, and lowered down. It galloped out of Tony's room on three legs, whining out a moan like a midnight train whistle. Tony felt a surge of pride in the moonlight of his bedroom, the floor scattered with pieces of his closet door. He walked over and looked down the hallway to see the giant bear turn and head toward the living room. He had to go wake up Madeline. and they had to get out of this house. Madeline sat in bed, squirming with tormented thoughts. They were back, and they were more horrible than ever. She held the heels of her palms to her cheeks and squeezed her skull. She felt her heartbeat throb in her temples. "Tonight is the night you must kill yourself. You will never get rid of this. You have to murder the others. Go to the kitchen and find the knives. You know what drawer they're in. Kill Devin first. He's playing video games and won't see you coming. Then, murder Rose. Bring their bodies to your room afterwards. Molest them on your bed. Then, slice them up and play with them. Cover yourself with their organs and dance. Dance! Then, Tony can hear and come to your room. Then, kill yourself, right in front of him." Madeline screamed and pounded fists against her inflamed head. Meanwhile, Devin sat in the living room on the big sectional couch and played video games. He had finished a bottle of wine with Rose earlier, and they had a pretty great makeout session, at least until Devin's nose erupted with blood and it spilled down to Rose's shirt. She was usually more patient with his condition, but this time was completely turned off. He apologized, but also scoffed, telling her that he can't help it, and that if anything, it helped him understand what she went through with her body every few weeks. That did not go over well, and so Rose stormed off to the guest cottage, leaving Devin to his wine and video games. He played, not doing so well, until a shaking sound from behind caught his attention. He paused the game and took off his headset, throwing his eyes back to the hallway that led to the children's wing. A gallop of several large feet boomed and banged over the floorboards, growing nearer and nearer to the entrance of the living room there in the dark. Devin could hear a roar like a grizzly bear, a hungry, devilish roar. It got closer and closer. Devin wiped his eyes, not believing what he was perceiving. Just when the sound approached the living room as close as it could, it stopped. Someone exited the hallway and slowly turned to face Devin, who had now stood up from the couch, throwing down his controller. It wasn't a nightmare beast. It wasn't an animal. "Rose?" Devin asked, full of fear. Rose stood there at the mouth of the hallway in the almost full dark. Devin recognized her silver-lined silhouette. It seemed as though she was fully naked and covered in some thick liquid. "Hey, Devin, where did I put that rock that I found in the cave yesterday?" she asked, sweetly, yet strangely. Something about her didn't seem like Rose at all. "What? Rose?" "Devin, where is the stone?" Her shadowed, naked body stood still, yet her voice turned stern. It's in your purse, remember? That's always where I keep cool stuff I find." Devin raised his shoulders like he was stating the obvious. "Okay, Devin, I love you," Rose's likeness sang out to him across the living room. Devin leaned his head back in amazement. They had never said those words to each other. "What? You do?" he yelled in surprise. "I always have. I always will," she answered. "Well, babe, that's great news. I love you too, babe. Come here." Devin began to walk toward the shadowed outline of his beloved Rose. But as he approached her, he could definitely decide that she was naked and covered in dark liquid. "I have to go," Rose said, this time in a low, angry voice. Devin heard a click and a creak and looked over past the hotel lobby-sized kitchen and through the foyer and saw the front door slowly open on its own. Then, Rose tucked her arms into her chest and began running toward it and quickly escaped into the night. "Babe? Babe! Rose!" Devon, bewildered but still buzzing off of wine and love, chased after whom he thought was Rose, running out of the mansion and into the night under the full sturgeon moon. Tony banged on Madeline's door, having run all the way down the hall once he could no longer hear the long-eared bear. He still held his sharp hockey skate. He had to get Madeline out of here with him. "Maddie?" he yelled, banging on her door. Madeline flinched at the sound and turned toward it. Her mind was drowning with boiling ideas. She got out of bed and ran to the door, locking it and using all of her weight to hold the knob. "No, Tony! Leave me alone!" she screamed desperately, her brain sending her messages of murder and sodomy and suicide without relent. She cried loudly. "Maddie, we have to get out of here now!" Tony banged on the door with his fists. "No, Tony, you don't know what I'm capable of. I'm crazy, Tony. I'm gonna go to hell." "What are you talking about, Maddie? You're not crazy. We gotta get out of here now. It's not safe." "You're not safe with me, Tony. I don't want to hurt you." Madeline half screamed, half sobbed, painful tears running down her face in the dark. "You could never hurt me, Maddie. We have to get out of here and then we can find you some help," Tony yelped, feeling his own tears welling up and then spilling down his cheeks. "Tony, if I snap and try to hurt you, you have to promise that you'll kill me before I kill you," Madeline screamed through the door. Tony couldn't believe what he was hearing. He took furiously quick breaths. "You have to promise me, Tony. Promise!" "Fine, Maddie. I have my hockey skate here with me. I just fought off a bear with it. And if you try to hurt me, then I'll have to kill you." He couldn't understand the words coming from his mouth. He tasted salt from his tears. Madeline also sobbed, and then unlocked and opened the door. Her terrible thoughts waned for a moment, enough for her to show some semblance of herself. "Tony!" She collapsed into her brother's arms. He dropped the skate and hugged his sister tighter than he ever had. They both cried together. "You're not crazy, Maddie. I know you. You're my hero. You just need some help, Maddie. Even heroes need help." She had never heard Tony call her his hero. A new wave of tears seeped out from her. Her brain cooled. "We gotta leave the house, Maddie." Madeline snapped back into focus, wiping her face. "You're right. Rose, Devon, we have to get them." Rose was awakened from her sleep in the guest cottage, having turned in early after her and Devon's spat. She heard a noise underneath the bed. She adjusted herself, then woke up enough to fully listen. Ears open, she could hear what sounded like teeth chewing on wood. Something biting, grinding against wood, sounding like it was ripping off chunks. Rose's green eyes widened. She took breaths through her nose, her heartbeat quickening. Then, a series of bumps from underneath lifted her bed slightly. The chewing noise continued and got louder. It started sounding wet, sloppy, frenzied. Rose quickly grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight, leaning over and pointing down to the floor. For the rest of her life, she would wish she hadn't done so. The silver circle of flashlight showed her a great sprawl of greasy, black hair, crowning a wet, bubbling, pale, fleshy mass peeking out from under her bed. Whatever it was, it seemed to have a large, round mouth, and it seemed to be sucking on the opening of her white leather purse. Two yellow, vertical eyes glowed open from underneath the black, leaf and dirt-filled hair. Rose screamed, a scream that was quickly muffled as her attacker crawled out from under the bed and onto her face. Madeline and Tony ran from their wing of the house into the living room. "Devon? Rose!" Tony called out, keeping his ice skate raised. "Guys?" Madeline yelled. There was no answer. only darkness throughout the main body of the mansion. "The cottage," Madeline said loudly, as the two of them met eyes and then began in a sprint out of the kitchen, through the courtyard under the full moon, and then over to the guest cottage. "Wait," Madeline whispered to Tony and held an arm out to stop him from barging in. "Something's not right." Madeline heard what sounded like somebody screaming through a soaked pillow. She creaked open the cottage door and turned the light on. The two children's eyes and mouths fell open in astute disgust and paralyzing terror. A large mass of tallow-covered flesh almost took up the entire bedroom of the cottage. It had arms on the bed and legs against the wall. Bulbous rolls of fat rippled throughout its body. Its head was wide and elliptical, and a long mess of black hair flowed down to the floor like a waterfall of ink. It had Rose pinned to her pillow, stretching a mouth around her face, looking like its lips could split at any moment. Two yellow eyes adorned its face right above the straining mouth. Long teeth pierced Rose's eyes and cheeks and chin. Tony looked and saw clusters of holes in the loose, greasy skin of its back and sides, with small, crustacean-like creatures burrowed in deep like barnacles, their little claws and antennae showing within the inflamed rims of the cavities. Rose's arms were held down to the bed by pinchers that grew out of where the monster's ears would be. She writhed in agony underneath her muffled scream, covered by the creature's stretched, putrid mouth. Tony also screamed. Madeline took it all in. This was her fault. Maybe the voice within her was right about one thing. She needed to be the one to die, not Tony. This was all her fault. She was better off dead after all of this. "Tony, give me the skate." "What?" "Hand me the skate, Tony. This is all my fault, and I have to fight it." She held out her hand. Tony shuddered and handed her the skate, still wondering if he was in some horrible dream. Madeline nodded at her little brother. Maybe she could be his hero after all. She turned back toward the monster on top of Rose on the bed, and raised the skate and began to drop it blade first with as much force as she could. The vertical yellow eyes swiveled around the terrible face of the monster and trained right on Madeline. A large, crab-like claw that had been buried by its obese belly sprang forth and grabbed Madeline around the waist, not squeezing hard enough to kill her, but with more than enough force to stop her. Rose kept on screaming within the monster's mouth, the sound stifled, but growing ever insane with pain and horror. Madeline began chopping at the clawed arm with the skate, and the flesh began to break, showing a shell underneath. After a few good strikes, the claw fell off entirely. Tony, standing behind Madeline with hands to his screaming mouth, could only watch his hero in terror and wonder. "Get out!" Madeline screamed. The monster howled in pain, its lips and teeth still covering Rose's face. Rose stopped her screaming and went still, just as the creature bit deeply into her cheeks, eyes, and forehead, causing a wet crunch. The monster began to raise up off the bed, still biting down on Rose's face and dragging her with it. The huge body of the thing began to crawl and slither toward a nearby window, using its other clawed arm to break the glass. It began to seep out of the cottage bedroom until Rose's horizontally held body caught the walls around the window. Two more claws came forth out of some disgusting recess of the creature's torso and snapped Rose's spine in half, folding her body up, slamming it like a hated book. The creature spilled out of the window with Rose's body and off into the night. Madeline dropped the skate. The severed claw on the floor twitched to life and crawled toward and out the window after the rest of its body. Tony grabbed her from behind, and they both sobbed and screamed. No one knows where it comes from. Epilogue. The body of Rose Blanchard was found on private property near Hidden Lake State Park after police were led there by the tip of Madeline Rappaport. Rose was found crumpled outside of a cave with traumatic facial avulsion, with evidence of unstable thoracolumbar fracture dislocation consistent with traumatic transection and adipose tissue avulsion. In other words, her face was eaten off and her spine was snapped in half. She also had cuts deep into her stomach and buttocks, where her fat was forcibly removed. She was also found with the DNA in blood of her boyfriend, Devin Walton. After authorities were notified by two horribly upset children at the Rappaport mansion, a patrol was sent to the premises, but was met beforehand by Devin Walton, who was running alongside the road in the dark. He was stopped and questioned, but kept repeating that he was looking for Rose. He seemed shaken. A second patrol car took him in and down to the station for further questioning, held until DNA evidence had him convicted as the murderer. The police had notified Mr. and Mrs. Rappaport of the crime almost as soon as the children had called. They chartered a private jet and were home well before morning. They pulled up to the house to blue lights whirring and their two children huddled under shock blankets, surrounded by officials. Tony and Madeline sprinted toward them, shedding their covers. "I need help! I need so much help!" Madeline buried her face on her mother's shoulder and wept. Tony also took into his father's arms, sobbing. In the weeks and months that followed that horrific night, Madeline and Tony Rappaport got the help they needed. Tony was able to go back to school much sooner than his sister. Madeline found a wonderful team of doctors and therapists that could help her manage her mental condition. Sitting on a couch in a cozy room, Madeline did what she did best. She learned. She learned that she was not crazy. She learned that what she had was actually common and manageable. She learned that everybody got these strange, intrusive thoughts from time to time. She learned that these thoughts don't come from her and should not even be considered or engaged with. She learned that she had to let these thoughts in and through her and not fight them. She learned that a happy life was still possible, even with all she had been through. The Rappaports fought all they could with the investigation and trial of Devin Walton, but the evidence was just too strong. He would die in prison. The entire family would visit him regularly and continue to try to find a way to prove him innocent. On a bright September day, over 1 year since the deadly night, Madeline found herself walking home from another successful session with her favorite doctor. The afternoon rays fell through the turning leaves and scattered, dappled into 1,000 sundrops on the sidewalk. Madeline smiled. She felt like that too, a golden light, just broken up into pieces. A dark bluish blur whirred past her periphery. She gasped and shot eyes up to a branch. An indigo bunting sat, turning its beautiful little head straight toward Madeline. She reached into her book bag and pulled up her camera, quickly training and focusing the lens before taking the photo. She smiled down at the footage before looking back up and thanking the bird as it flew away. When she got home, she was surprised by a pancake meal prepared by her parents. Tony joined in too, and together they all enjoyed a delicious breakfast at dinner. Madeline got emotionally joyful at one point, tears watering the rims of her eyes as she giggled down at the simple beauty of blueberry pancakes with her family. Later that evening, she sat down at the piano and started in on a new piece, one that Juilliard had asked her to compose for one of their youth programs. It was going perfectly, perhaps the greatest thing she had ever written, until about halfway through, when she messed up a note. "You'll never get rid of me, you failure! Not until you really snap and kill yourself!" A horrible voice barked at her within her brain. Madeline didn't pay it any mind. She just kept on playing right where she left off, smiling and getting lost in her own music. No one knows where it comes from. However, lots of people are able to live wonderful lives in spite of it. They're able to enjoy themselves and manage it. For Madeline, the horrible remains, as it most certainly always would, but it would never rain. Never again.
Yeah. You know what's really easy to do and even easier to forget? Help me out and hit that like button if you're listening on YouTube. If you're listening somewhere else, what the hell? Pop in and give me a thumb. Say hi while you're at it. Helps me a ton with that damn algorithm. And besides, it's always nice to see you there. All right then, let's hop on that crazy train. All aboard! Oh, shit. Welcome, friend. How are you? As usual, there's no shortage of holidays to celebrate this May 15th, but I'd rather take the opportunity to make a public service announcement. It's National Senior Fraud Awareness Day today. A good time to remind your old mom and dad not to click on those goofy email links and give their passwords away and shit. I know, Chester. Those poor boomers just can't be trusted with their own emails. It's just pitiful, isn't it? Well, my own mom don't even own her own kidneys anymore, for God's sake. Anyway, come on in, friend. Oh, that's better. Hey, speaking of emails, I just got one from this Nigerian prince the other day. Yeah, turns out I've got a rich relative over there. I wasn't going to say anything, but your old pal's going to be doing pretty good for himself real soon. Anyway, check out simplyscarypodcast.com and click the Patrons area button. You can get the entire catalog ad-free and available to download or stream for as little as $7.99 a month. If only Craig was half Nigerian, right? Tough break. And patreon.com/Drew Blood? Hell, that's couch cushion money for old Prince Drew. Well, tonight, friends, we're joined again by author Kyle Harrison by way of our friends at Velox Books. This is another one from his collection, Very Dark Thoughts, which I hope y'all are going to check out. Tonight's story follows a horror enthusiast who decides to attend a haunted attraction, a private jet experience that delivers exactly what it advertises, which turns out to be the problem. So without further delay, from author Kyle Harrison, I give you Full Moon Flights. Last year, Bloody Disgusting gave it 4 out of 5 screams. Fangoria magazine touted it as the most original haunted concept on the market. But you shouldn't believe the reviews. No, really, don't. Full Moon Flights is not what it seems. According to the brochure, it is a modern haunted house for fans of fear, a departure from the ordinary, and a journey into the unknown, where nightmares are inescapable. We don't allow guests to book flights. Instead, we let those who have the courage and curiosity come find us, the blurb read. Everything about it screamed publicity stunt to me. A private jetliner filled with costumed actors and jump scares designed to give people an adrenaline rush all night long. The latest event was this Halloween near me, and since I couldn't think of a better way to spend the evening, I decided to take a drive out to the provided coordinates where the plane was set to land. Departure time was scheduled for precisely 12:01 a.m., so I got there early, intent on documenting each and every aspect of the experience. Besides myself, there were about 6 other cars parked at an old airstrip. A fitting place for the spooky flight to land, I thought, as I looked about the dilapidated buildings. No one had used this place in a very long time, if ever. I grabbed my cell and a small backpack filled with emergency supplies and gear, everything I thought I would need for the night. But then, from the looks of some of the other patrons' gear, it seemed I was the one unprepared.
First time?
A woman wearing a Freddy Krueger shirt asked, as she offered me a small capsule. Yeah. Well, what's this for? I asked.
Helps keep your head in the game. For a little while anyway,
she said as she stared up at the sky.
Guess they want to be fashionably late, like usual.
How many times have you been a passenger? I remember reading that some claimed the event had staff hidden among the guests to try and boost interest, so everything she told me I took with a grain of salt at first.
5 times, maybe 6? It's a hell of a ride, I'll tell you what.
She answered and extended her hand and added,
I'm Isabella. Nice to meet you.
Max, same here. When are they supposed to arrive? I asked, noticing the other passengers were getting antsy. I couldn't see any signs of a plane in the sky, and I wondered what sort of showy entrance the proprietors had in mind to dazzle us.
No, these things are unpredictable.
She lit a smoke, and I wandered toward the other passengers. She tried to sell you one of those pills too, eh? A man with an Australian accent asked, as I looked down at my palm where the red and white tablet sat. Is it some kind of hallucinogen? I whispered. Don't know, mate, but I personally wouldn't risk it. This night is probably going to be crazy enough as is, he told me. You came all the way from around the world just for this? I asked. He didn't respond, but his eyes showed a story of pain and heartache. He was searching for something but wouldn't dare disclose what. The others were not as fascinating. Twins from Manchester were here for a birthday present to each other, and a couple of young reporters finished up our group. Considering the price of tickets for the event, I knew that to get their money's worth, they all expected an extreme fright. 20 minutes passed and the flight still hadn't arrived, so the taller twin, Tanya, started to make a fuss.
This is so unprofessional,
she said as she walked toward the wide hangar bay. I gathered she was hoping to find someone to complain to, and it was the first time that I noticed we were the only ones here. I had read online the flights were always packed to the gills, so why were there only 6 of us?
What do you suppose is going on?
Isabella asked. She wasn't as chatty earlier. In fact, the whole group seemed on edge as we followed Tanya to the other side of the airfield. Even the wind had stopped blowing. Something about the night just suddenly seemed more sinister. As we turned to go back toward where we had parked, a sharp burst of air pierced the darkness and nearly knocked us down. Tom the Aussie lost his hat and tumbled over as I looked up and saw the large passenger plane seemingly appear out of nowhere. It was about the size of a Delta jetliner, with at least the capacity for 150 passengers or more, painted entirely black to match the dark sky. A rumble of thunder crackled across the backdrop of the plane as I noticed that there were only a few windows and only one entrance, further showing that they intended for you to have an immersive experience once aboard. I knew it hadn't been there moments ago, and now all of a sudden it had landed. The ramp to the first-class seating area was already lowered, as though they had been the ones waiting for us rather than the other way around. Isabella gave me a nudge and said nervously,
I told you they know how to make an entrance.
I nodded and grabbed my things, heading toward the plane as I spotted one of the stewardesses gathering luggage from the other passengers. Tom was in the first line, eager to be aboard.
Welcome back, Mr. Bradley. Always a pleasure to have you flying with us,
the pale blonde employee said. Her face looked so perfect, I thought she was a robot of some kind, so pristine and exact. Tom became red in the face, apparently not anticipating that they would give away his frequent flyer status, and then dashed up the steps to find a seat before any of us had a chance to open a conversation about it.
Do you have your tickets?
The stewardess asked, focusing on the twins next. Riley, the shorter one, took them out of her pocket and both of them eagerly entered without much fanfare. I was next.
Welcome back, Mr. Declan. I see you came prepared this time,
the stewardess said as I took out my ticket. I gave her a look of confusion. This is my first time, I told her. The stewardess didn't blink as she ripped the ticket and told me.
Of course it is. Yes. I must have confused you with someone else.
I didn't bother asking any other questions as I figured it was probably part of the show and boarded the plane as well. At the front, before the first-class cabin area, two more blonde stewardesses that looked almost identical to the one I had seen outside greeted me near the pilot's chambers and offered me a warm drink, which resembled some kind of raspberry tonic.
Before takeoff, we recommend all passengers drink this mixture. It will prevent any sort of nausea or displacement,
the first woman told me. I knew it was likely they wouldn't let me board unless I downed the concoction, so I drank it hurriedly and then pushed open the curtains to look at the interior of the cabin. Much to my surprise, it looked like an ordinary jetliner would, with rows of compartments above the seats for luggage, and about 5 seats on either side of the aisle, most of which were empty. I checked my stub to see where I was supposed to sit. Economy row C, seat 3. The Aussie was the only one of us in first class, and I almost envied his deep pockets, wondering if his experience would be entirely different from our own. Back in economy, I immediately felt a bit more cramped and claustrophobic, especially due to the dim lighting. Was that for aesthetics? I wondered as I moved to my seat and noted I was near a window that appeared to be sealed shut. A moment later, an Asian businessman appeared from the curtain and nodded, sitting down next to me. "Did you get here late?" I asked, not recalling him in the crowd outside. He responded in his native tongue and took the seat beside me, nervously fidgeting with his wedding ring as more passengers boarded. "Bloody hell, where are all these people coming from?" I asked, noticing a whole family pass us to go to third class. I reached over to my window to try to see if maybe a large group had shown up at the last minute, but then Isabella reached from the row behind me and kept me from opening it.
I wouldn't do that if I were you,
she warned. I snatched my hand away, tired of her games, and pulled the shutter on the window up anyway. But the airfield didn't look familiar anymore. Instead, it seemed as though we had landed somewhere in a busy city district like Hong Kong or Seoul, nowhere near the same rustic countryside of Midwest America. "What the hell?" I whispered as Isabella shut it back.
We're about to take off, and trust me, you want these closed,
she warned again. This time I decided to listen. Another stewardess appeared near the front of the cabin and grabbed a small speaker connected to the compartment beside her to give us a few guidelines. I couldn't help but notice how the plane was seemingly packed full of people.
Good evening. On behalf of all of us here at Full Moon Flights, we want to thank you again for joining us on this amazing journey. The captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign at this time as we go over a few instructions in the event of an emergency,
she said in a sing-song voice. Honestly, she seemed a bit too chipper given the information she next presented.
As you might have noticed during your arrival, there are no emergency exits or equipment aboard this flight. We have optimized the cabin to be entirely for the experience into the unknown. That being said, should we encounter any unanticipated turbulence, we ask all passengers to remain seated. The safest bet for us to reach our destination will be for your full cooperation in these circumstances.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing, especially how dangerous it sounded. I heard one man behind me cuss profusely as the stewardess next explained there was no emergency oxygen on the airliner either.
Rest assured that what you will be dealing with tonight will take your breath away. But if you can face it, you will get to your destination as intended,
she said as she finished her announcement and then disappeared to the front of the plane. Something about the way she spoke made me very uneasy. Her choice of words felt intentionally vague. A clamor of gossip stirred as we all wondered what the hell we had signed up for.
This must be just to get us nervous,
a younger girl said a few rows up. I heard they intentionally make it this intense before the show starts, another man said. It made me a little calmer to hear these rumors swirl about, but I still had no idea what to expect. Beside me, Isabella squeezed my shoulder and muttered,
"Buckle up, Max."
I obeyed her and listened as a new voice came over the intercom. This one was gruff and sounded distorted, almost inhuman. This is your captain speaking. We are T-minus 3 minutes to take off. I'm not sure why, but the succinct way he spoke, coupled with the way my stomach was twisted into a knot, made me very uneasy. There was no turning back, no escape, I realized. Then the plane began to move. Instinctively, I gripped the seat cushion as I felt the engines begin to roar and the plane shake and pick up speed. The Asian businessman next to me did the same, closing his eyes and seemingly chanting. Was he praying? I could hear the wheels skid against the runway and the noise grew louder as I was pushed into the seat a bit by the thrust of the engines. Then we began to ascend. The roar got louder as I looked about at some of the other passengers to see their reaction. Some were grabbing bags to puke into, clearly new flyers, while others were excitedly counting the seconds as we kept going higher. I wasn't sure which category I fit in, but I was ready for the flight to stop its rush into the heavens. The plane shook again as we reached what I assumed was highest altitude, and the light above my seat told me I could move about the cabin freely. Immediately, I turned to Isabella to get some clear understanding of what to expect, only to find she had already unbuckled and left to the third-class cabin. I sighed in frustration, trying to get the attention of a stewardess, but the women were now standing toward the front like statues, unblinking and looking on toward us. It was bizarre, but exactly what I expected for this sort of thing. I took a few breaths and calmed down, reminding myself that I should be trying to enjoy the experience as I saw the curtain behind the stewardess open and a woman wearing a geisha dress and a kabuki mask enter, dancing down the aisle toward my row. Immediately, the Asian man next to me tensed up. I saw his face had a look of panic. Was this someone he knew? Had the flight personnel secretly allowed them to board? Was he in danger? The woman got closer and then bowed respectfully toward me, clearly wanting to sit beside the businessman. I'm not sure why, but I felt obliged to let her in and moved out toward the aisle. The businessman started to shout something in alarm and tried to unbuckle. Then the woman straddled his lap. It almost looked like she wanted to make out with him as I watched her gently touch his face. He started to shout louder, and I watched as the woman leaned in for a kiss. Someone squeezed my shoulder again, and I turned to see Isabella standing there.
"Come with me,"
she ordered. I half wanted to see what would happen to the man I was sitting beside, but still obeyed. Clearly, she knew more about this flight than me. As we entered third class, I found myself taking a moment to adjust to the darkness in the room. There weren't any windows back here, and the only dim lighting was coming from the screens on the back of each of the seats, miniature flat-screen televisions that all of the passengers were glued to like zombies. "What is this?" I whispered, worried that our voices would break some of them from a trance.
"I believe they are doing something to him, brainwashing or something. I'm not sure. I was hoping you could help me get into the luggage compartment overhead,"
she said as we made it to the middle of the aisle. I noticed that the expressions on the people's faces seemed contorted with terror or dread, as though whatever they were watching were driving them mad. "Sure, but before I do that, you need to be honest with me. Why are you really here?" Isabella bit her lip and glanced toward the door.
We don't have time for that. The stewardesses will be here any moment. So can you help me break this open or not?
I huffed and looked at the lock, realizing that I actually did have something that could open it up. "Yeah, sure. Let me go back to my luggage." Isabella told me to hurry as I returned to economy class, and I saw the stewardesses were now removing something from the seat near me. It looked like the shriveled up remains of the businessman. It looked like a corpse.
Mr. Declan, your in-flight movie is about to start,
The first stewardess said, as I noticed there was now a mini TV in front of my seat as well. Had that always been there?
It's best if you keep your journey to yourself and not worry about others,
The stewardess said with a pleasant smile. She stood there waiting for me to comply with her instructions. Hesitantly, I sat down and put on the headphones. Everything about this was beginning to grow increasingly stranger and stranger. Not what I signed up for at all. As I activated the screen in front of me, a burst of white noise pierced my ears, and I nearly knocked the headphones off. Then crashing waves filled the screen and I froze. What I was seeing didn't seem possible. It was showing me memories of my time as a child near the beach. Memories I'd never shared with anyone. I watched in amazement as I saw my own mother in the waves. This was the moment that she had taken her own life, I thought. A secret that I had wanted to take to my grave. How could this flight know? The noise got louder as I heard whispers amid the waves. Something was speaking to me, telling me its own secrets. Chills ran down my spine as every moment played out exactly as I remembered it. My mother was just walking into the water, unconcerned with my cries as the waves crashed over her body. The whispers got louder. It sounded just like her. "Join me," it croaked. Then shots rang out amid the cabin. I jolted back to reality and saw Tom enter an economy class waving a pistol about. The stewardess was his victim, her lifeless body sprawled on the aisle in front of me. Except there was no blood. She looked just like a mannequin now. "What the hell, man?" I shouted, standing up as he neared my seat. "Don't let him harvest you, Max. You're too good for that. We can make it through together. But you have to help me, you hear?" he said. Other passengers were screaming as he waved the gun around, warning them to stay back. "What the hell is wrong with you? They're bloody frightened of you," I shouted. "That's exactly what they want you to think, mate. Now take me to that stupid chick you were talking to earlier. The frequent flyer," he ordered. I raised my hands up defensively, and we walked together toward third class. "Look, whatever you think this is, it's not. These are just actors," I told him as we entered the dark room. Even when I said that, I didn't fully believe it. Something deep in the pit of my stomach told me that none of this was normal. I planned to use the sudden shift in light to take advantage of him, but I never made it that far. Instead, the entire plane started to shake due to turbulence, and he lost the gun. It slid across the floor as he fell on me, and I shouted to Isabella to find it. She obeyed, and I turned to punch Tom straight in the jaw as the lights in the cabin began to flicker. Then all of the passengers around us started to convulse and go into shock, seemingly being given a stroke due to the sudden loss of power. Amid the chaos, somehow Isabella found the weapon and aimed it toward me. Tom had already produced a knife, and I shouted for her to shoot him. Instead, She aimed at the luggage compartment over our heads. A single bullet caused the lock to blast off and several small bags fell, causing Tom's knife to become lodged in my shoulder. "Shit!" I said as I looked across at some of the other passengers, begging them to help. Instead, they were beginning to attack each other. One man was gouging out his son's eyes and eating them. A woman was digging straight into her face, trying to rip skin off. And 2 children were smashing each other in the stomach constantly with sharp forks. Any hope I had that this was all an act died at that moment. Isabella scrambled to search amid the bags as Tom got his bearings. Then she found what she was looking for. It looked like a small briefcase. "Don't!" Tom shouted. I frowned, trying to figure out what the hell was happening, as she put in the correct key code and the latches unbolted. Inside, there were 6 vials filled with a glowing yellow serum. She grabbed one and rushed toward the Aussie. I crawled out of the way into one of the seats as she lunged and pierced his neck, forcing the needle in all the way. I saw Tom's eyes dilate and then go completely black. Then he fell to the floor unconscious. I snatched up his knife just in case things got crazier from here. It was a smart call. Before I got the chance to even ask Isabella what the hell she was doing, she was through the curtain to economy class. I slowly stood up, trying to catch my breath, when one of the mutilated passengers grabbed hold of me, forcing me to stare into their hollow, sunken face. There wasn't even a face there anymore, just a maw with endless teeth. Somehow they had transformed into nightmarish beings. I pushed it away and tumbled over Tom to get back to economy class, pausing in between the 2 cabins to go into the restroom. The small room felt so much more claustrophobic than usual as I locked the door and looked at my reflection in the mirror. Splashing water on my face, I tried to get a hold of myself and chanted, "It's all in your head, Max. It's all in your head." I gripped the sink for a minute and felt my breathing return to normal, hoping that maybe I was able to come back to normalcy. Then I noticed something shimmer in the mirror. I looked at it for a short moment, frowning in concern. Then my reflection smiled wickedly toward me. A second later, a strong, icy hand emerged from the mirror and gripped my neck. I was gasping for air as I felt my reflection strangle me, and I reached into my pocket where Tom's knife was still hidden away. I sliced it across the doppelganger's arm, causing strange black slime to bleed out from him as he loosened his grip and I escaped to the main cabin. I was still trying to make heads or tails of what was happening when I caught sight of the twins. After all that had just happened, I could hardly remember their names. Riley? Tanya? All I knew for sure was that they were both covered in blood, hobbling toward me, holding their severed heads. Knives in their hands, having carved off each other's skulls, blocking my way to first class. I could hear Isabella shouting something to a stewardess as I looked back toward third class. The jetliner was shaking violently again, and I heard the captain announce something overhead.
"Attention, esteemed guests. We are entering a rough patch, and I advise you to buckle up,"
he said in a voice that sounded too excited for the coming maelstrom. Suddenly, I was thrust to the ceiling. The twins fell upward as well, their bloody bodies toppling like rag dolls, as I found myself unable to avoid sliding into them. The airliner shook, and I slowly moved toward the aisle where this all began, trying desperately to regain my footing. Then I heard a loud growl from the third-class cabin. I shouldn't have looked. Tom's head peered out of the curtain, but what followed it was not human. It had a long neck like a giraffe without skin, and legs that were as wide as the entire cabin, stretching out toward passengers and stepping on them like ants. The legs had mouths like a Venus flytrap, shrieking as the strange creature twisted its body like a contortionist. It clung to the ceiling, Tom's pure black eyes looking straight at me as his chest opened up and hundreds of miniature spidery creatures skittered toward me.
Holy shit!
Isabella shouted as she entered the room. Tom leapt toward her, shrieking as his mandibles ripped into her chest. The plane started to level again, and I moved down to my seat, desperately trying to find some way off. All I could think to do was break the window. I still had Tom's knife, and my rattled brain told me to give it a try. Reaching toward the window, I raised it up, even as I heard Isabella scream for me to stop. I was expecting to see just the darkness of the night. Instead, it was a blinding light, hitting me right in the face as I covered my eyes and tried to hit the window. I heard the glass crack, and I kept going as hard as I could. Suddenly, the screams in the cabin were replaced with the roar of a void. Whatever was beyond the window, I had managed to reach it, and now we were all about to be sucked out. I gripped my seat as hard as I could as alarms began to blare. Tom's gargantuan body was the first to go. It was like watching a camel be shoved through a needle hole. His face contorted, and I heard the breaking of bones. He tried to grab hold of me, his tongue lapping out and sliding against my face as I heard him mindlessly groan. His front claw grabbed at my hand and I lost my grip, my legs hitting the shattered glass as I felt the roar of the plane against my body. It felt like I was a puppet, being dragged by a massive child. I was gripping the window, looking toward the heavens. I can't describe the impossible things I saw in that sky. This was not our Earth, not our reality. It was a kaleidoscope of universes crashing into one another, exploding in rainbows of colors that I couldn't comprehend. From the endless ethereal streaks of light and dark, massive tentacles wrapped around the plane like vines, suffocating it. I could see something just beyond the horizon. A maw. The jaws of eternal damnation themselves, ready to swallow me whole. Isabella reached out of the window to grab my hand and struggled to pull me in. I was lost in the gaze of the eyes of the demonic entity that awaited us. As soon as I was inside, I saw that she had another serum prepared, this time for me.
You really should have taken that pill, bud,
she warned as she stabbed into my arm before I could get a chance to react. The world spun. I saw her face begin to melt away. In its place were the twins, growing two necks and forming a single monster to grin devilishly at me. Then they faded and showed the geisha woman, except this time her kabuki mask was made of flesh, the remains of her husband. Her long claw-like fingernails dragged at my chest as she removed the mask, and I saw my own mother. Her lifeless eyes locked with my own as I fell into an ocean of sleep. I can't remember what happened next. It felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. I was above the plane now, watching as the tentacles of the monster crushed it and swallowed it whole. The shrieks of passengers, not just hundreds, but millions from all across reality, being fed into this hungry monster's jaws. Then I was back in my seat. The unfasten your seatbelt sign flashed on, and I gripped my cushion, looking toward the Asian businessman who was now seemingly alive. How was I alive? I looked down at my arm, rubbing the place where Isabella had injected me. It felt sore. This hadn't been a dream, I realized as I looked around the cabin. The overhead intercom came on again.
Attention passengers, we are about to arrive at our destination. Please remain seated to enjoy the full experience.
I felt a squeeze on my shoulder, and then Isabella whispered into my ear.
Everything you just experienced was real. It just hasn't happened here yet. You need to find Tom and get off this flight. Now.
I was about to turn to her when she squeezed my sore spot harder and snapped at me.
Don't look back. Don't hesitate. Just run.
Then she passed me a gun. Was it the same one that Tom had used before? I wasn't sure. My heart started pumping fast as I unbuckled and moved toward first class. The stewardesses were there, blocking my way. For some reason, I knew they would try to stop me, so I swung the weapon straight toward the left one. The two of them slammed into each other, and it sounded like two dummies collapsing against one another in a store. I pushed past them to enter the first-class seating area. Most of the passengers here were rich upper class, just like any other normal flight. But as I moved down the aisle, I couldn't help but to notice the color was drained from their faces. They were trapped in their seats, unable to move. I reached toward one man to try and wake him, and his skin became as brittle as ash.
They are husks,
a voice said in front of me. I turned and looked to see a man standing there wearing a pilot uniform. But nothing about him made me feel that he was human. He might have once been, but now all that remained was this memory.
What are you doing to them?
I asked, my voice trembling as I searched the cabin for Tom. Isabella's warnings was ringing in my head, but I still needed to know more.
Only what they signed up for. What you've already experienced. You've cheated, Max. Seen the end of the journey and managed to make it back. But it doesn't matter. The fear we can harvest from your soul is endless. You will never truly leave this flight,
he said, taking a step toward me. I clenched my fists and aimed the weapon toward him, letting loose a few rounds into his body. It didn't deter the specter. I'm not even sure why I tried after all I had seen, but it did grab Tom's attention. He stood up and moved toward me.
What are you doing, man? Do you want to get us both killed?
I looked toward the gun, my hand shaking as I saw a scar was beginning to form on my arm. How had it gotten there?
I think we might already be dead,
I said, passing him the weapon. The ghost pilot was gone temporarily, but Tom warned it wouldn't matter.
God, my head hurts. That drug really did a number on me, mate,
he said, rubbing the spot where Isabella had injected him.
How was any of this possible?
I said, my mouth dry as he led me back through economy class. This time I saw my doppelganger again, sitting there staring out the window and watching as the jetliner began to shake again. Tom was rattling off an explanation or an interpretation of events to me as we moved on.
From what I understand, the plane moves beyond the realm of space and time that we know, past the horizon into a new endless dimension, one where pure chaos is born. The people, if they are that, who run this contraption, they are feeding a creature, trying to birth it into the reality, this reality that we know of. It's growing stronger, Mix. Every new flight is harvesting more memories of reality and fear into it.
We were almost to the back of the plane now. No one had stopped us. His explanation made some sense to me as we stood there, and he started to look among the things before commenting.
You probably have dozens of other questions about this mess, like how I know all this and why Isabella, if that is her real name, is helping us. I don't know. I came on board for my wife. She boarded a flight 3 years ago, and I'm going to find her.
He paused and passed me the weapon, along with a parachute.
But that isn't how your journey ends, Max. You've got a chance. Warn the world if you can. Just don't worry about me.
If your wife is trapped here, you'll need to give her the serum that we both took. He nodded, bidding me adieu as he left to search the plane. The luggage compartment was oddly silent as the jetliner shook again, but I put on the backpack. I slowly walked toward the back of the plane, near to where the landing gear was stored. It would be the safest place to jump, I realized. I crouched down and gently kicked at the shutters beneath the gear, wondering how strong they were. Then I heard a faint whisper. Someone was there with me. Instinctively, I jolted up and cocked the weapon.
Show yourself!
From amid the luggage, I saw a shadow move and slither toward me. Eventually, it formed a shape. The ghost pilot? No. It was a doppelganger of my own mother, I realized.
Don't come any closer,
I warned her. Her eyes looked so watery and full of pain.
Max, it's me. I'm real. This is real. All of it.
She whispered to me.
It can't be. You're dead,
I shouted back.
I saw you die.
That was just one way my journey ended. It doesn't have to be that way anymore.
She said with a gentle smile.
The journey has shown me so much. We can have a life together. Endless amounts of lives.
I heard another rustle amid the luggage. It was Isabella coming to check on me.
Max, don't listen to her. You have to leave.
You can't leave, Max. No one can. Board the flight. You are part of the ship.
Another voice cackled amid the rafters. My mother raised a welcoming hand toward me.
This can be the life we never got together.
She pleaded with me. I knew it was a trap, but it felt so inviting. To be able to escape into an endless cacophony of realities where I could experience the love of a mom I never knew. But none of it would be real, I realized. I steadied my aim and fired straight at her head. The shadow screamed and blurred into 1,000 slithering eels as Isabella shouted for me to go. I turned and slammed my foot against the landing gear again and again. The black slime oozed toward me, the screeching eels rapidly closing in for a chokehold. Then finally the metal gave way and I saw clouds beneath my feet.
Come with me,
I shouted to Isabella. After all she had done to help me, it felt like helping her was the right thing to do.
It's too late for me. I'm part of the ship already. But I'll be here to help people get off every damn time,
she responded. I reached for her, ignoring her insistence that she was doomed. But instead, the shadows ensnared her, and I watched as black slime poured into her eyes and mouth. The shadow began to eat away at her body, and I knew I had to leave. Crawling down to the landing gear, the rush of air beneath the plane was overwhelming. I heard the screams from the flight roar, and didn't hesitate this time. I jumped. Spiraling into the air, I heard the roar of white noise and looked up to see an empty sky, like it had never been there at all. The force of my fall began to increase, and I pulled at my parachute ripcord, feeling it tug and jolt me up in the air. Then everything began to slow. I was drifting amid the atmosphere. Gradually, I made my way to the surface, tumbling about on the soft ground as I got my bearings. I was back at the airfield. Standing up, I checked my watch and realized that not a minute had passed since I boarded. I shook off the parachute and stumbled toward the road, watching as some cars approached. I covered my eyes as one car parked in front of me, and a man dressed as a British explorer stepped out.
What in the devil have you just been through, my good man?
He asked, clearly startled by my appearance. I saw a couple behind him holding tickets, apparently awaiting an upcoming flight. I opened my mouth to warn him. Then I saw a familiar face in the crowd. Isabella. I moved toward her, grabbed a hold of her arm and muttered, "Are you real? Is this real?"
Hey, hands off. What's gotten into you, bud?
She said, shaking me off like she didn't know me. I still felt like my head was spinning. "You were here for the full moon flight?" I asked, trying to understand and carefully choosing my words.
Yeah, first time. I heard they are a scream. You been on one yourself?
Isabella asked. I didn't see a hint of deception in her eyes. Slowly I nodded, reaching into my pocket and passing her the pill she had given me right before I boarded. Only she hadn't done that yet. "You'll need this for the trip," I told her. She gave me a look of puzzlement, and I walked off without another word. I knew there was nothing I could say to even explain how I understood her role now for this. A moment later, I felt a rush of wind, and the dark jetliner appeared right behind the hangar bay like it had before. A journey into the unknown, an experience like no other. That's what the reviews say, but that isn't what mine is going to say. This is my review for full moon flights. Don't believe the hype. This event is a killer, and you don't want to become a frequent flyer like me. And that was Full Moon Flights by author Kyle Harrison. A little about the author. Kyle Harrison is a prolific author with over 600 short stories under his belt, including 5 that were contest winners and runners-up, including the viral sensation The 24-Hour Game. Harrison's work has been published in over 20 anthologies and helped indie publishers to get their books out on the market. In his spare time, when he's not scaring people to death, he works in the transportation department at a Texas school. Giggity. Hey, thanks, Kyle.
And do old Drew Blood a favor, would you? Subscribe to his podcast wherever you do your listening and leave him a 5-star review and a kind word, even if you're listening on YouTube. He needs soldiers on all fronts to win this battle, and he appreciates it. To hear a premium ad-free edition of tonight's and all the other episodes, visit simplyscarypodcast.com today and click Patrons in the upper menu. You'll find yourself at chillingtalesfordarknights.com, where you can become a patron for as little as $5 per month and get access to their entire audio archive, all ad-free and available to download or stream. Thank you for your time and for supporting our sponsors. When you support our sponsors, you support this show. If you happen to use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube, you can follow and subscribe to Chillin' Tales for Dark Nights there, where you'll get all the latest updates and new releases and have the chance to interact with them each and every week. Oh, and you can find Drew Blood on Facebook and Instagram, and sometimes Twitter. The Drew Blood's Dark Tales podcast is accepting submissions, friend. If you've got a story or two you'd like to be featured on the show, send it to drewbloodhorror@gmail.com. If selected, you'll get the full treatment, 10 bananas.
Well, I'm afraid this is where we part ways, at least till next week. So grab a drink for the road, friend. It's been a while since I've shouted out any reviewers, so I'd like to say thanks to Nub Ninja, Cod1313, Toe Cutter, Gamer, Omni Dossman, and C. Barton 141 for the nice 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. I wish I could read off every one, but that could get a little long. I do appreciate all of you. And speaking of that, let me go ahead and shout out again all my beautiful patrons. I really love you people, you know that? Crazy fuckers. Thanks so much for being there for me and old Chester, and for Jeff and Paul for that matter. They join me on the Drew, Jeff, and Paul show as we shoot the shit and have fun. And you're all invited. So come on by and check it out if you haven't already. You might laugh a little. And what's wrong with a little laughter in your life? So may the wind be at your back, and may the road rise up to meet you. And until next time, my friends, y'all go fuck yourselves. Good night, y'all. Hey, friends, it's me again. You know what's really easy to do and even easier to forget? Help me out and hit that like button if you're listening on YouTube. If you're listening somewhere else, what the hell? Pop in and give me a thumb. Say hi while you're at it. Helps me a ton with that damn algorithm. And besides, it's always nice to see you there. All right then, let's hop on that crazy train.
All aboard!
Oh, shit. What's up, friend? It's International Workers' Day today, did you know that? And here we are, ready to work like a couple of rented mules. You know, I used to think this was a special day to celebrate those fellas who hang out at Home Depot in the morning, but it turns out that's not exactly what they meant by international. What they meant by that is that they celebrated everywhere. Yeah, I guess everywhere includes Home Depot too, Chester. I tell you, you've got to be the smartest amphibian I know. Well, anyway, come on in, friend. These biscuits don't earn themselves. All right. Hey, check out simplyscarypodcast.com and click the Patrons area button. You get their entire catalog ad-free and available to download or stream for as little as $7.99 a month. Your kind contribution will help ensure that we don't go belly up during this turbulent time. Already, we've got Craig swinging around a stripper pole trying to make ends meet. He's barely able to pay us, and when he does, the money smells kind of funny. Hey, also, go ahead and drop a few bucks at patreon.com/DrewBlood if you'd like. We've got mugs. Well, tonight we welcome back our old pal, Frederick Pangborn. Fred is no longer with us, but his brother Robert Pangborn has been kind enough to help us keep Fred's legacy alive. And as long as we're here, he will be too. In this one, 3 criminals, Keezer, his son Mark, and Mark's girlfriend Alyssa, hole up at the rural property of a loose acquaintance named Damon after a diamond heist gets bloody. And that's just what happens before things go wrong. So without further delay, from author Frederick Pangborn, I give you Ossuarium. John Keezer was pulled from his restless sleep to the faint sound of the local news from the car radio. He removed his glasses and ran his hand over his face and graying beard.
Anything?
He asked as he replaced his glasses. Damon shook his head, keeping his eyes on the road.
Nothing yet, which is probably a good thing.
Keezer turned in the passenger seat of the car and looked behind them. Both Alyssa and Mark were fast asleep, heads propped up against the windows. He turned back in his seat and gazed out of the passenger side window at the sunset behind the passing wooded landscape.
How much further?
Damon looked at the dashboard clock.
About an hour, give or take.
Keezer exhaled heavily and rolled his head lazily on his neck.
They haven't mentioned anything, huh?
Nope, not a word.
By the time the Frisco PD gets an idea of what happened, we'll be at the house and close to 300 miles away. You 3 are golden as of right now.
I hope so.
Where are we?
Keezer craned his neck, looking for any highway signs along the desolate stretch of road. He could see nothing but the darkening expanse of woodland terrain.
We passed through Eureka about 30 minutes ago. We'll be in Big Bar soon. Good,
Keezer said as he shifted in his seat. His thoughts drifted to earlier in the day and some 300 miles away back in San Francisco. The three of them, Damon excluded, had pulled off the perfect heist. Well, almost perfect. Keezer's poor decisions had gained him an outstanding debt to a particular Russian mobster, a Pavel Novikov, who was growing impatient with the $55,000 that was long past due. It didn't take long for Keezer's name to begin to surface in conversations as someone who was soon to turn up on a milk carton, never to be seen again, at least alive. With him now living on borrowed time and there being no possible way to repay the mountain debt, he decided that running would only delay the inevitable. So instead, he planned the unthinkable. One of Novikov's various business fronts was a diamond dealership down on Brannan Street. And unbeknownst to the crime boss, Keezer's son Mark happened to be dating one of their part-time workers for a couple of years now, Alyssa. After convincing the two 29-year-olds that it was the only way to ensure his survival and at the same time setting the three of them up with a hefty sum to boot, he planned out the robbery. Looting the store of a good portion of its uncut diamonds and all the cash they could carry went perfectly, and they were in and out before anyone knew any different with a speculated guess of $3.7 million. The only drawback was Mark had gone overboard and killed one of the employees who defied and taunted them with the usual, "Do you know who my uncle is?" and who happened to be Novikov's nephew. At that point, Keezer followed suit by shooting the other two employees, putting all three of their necks in the noose. It was as if he wanted to add insult to injury when Novikov discovered who had stolen from him and killed his nephew and employees. As the saying goes, dead men tell no tales, nor could they identify someone from a police lineup. As he already knew, it would only be a matter of time before all fingers pointed in his direction, and Damon was the suggestion of a friend of a friend. Keezer had met the man on 2 occasions, but only in passing. He was closer to Keezer's 55 years of age, and a tall, slender man whose bent posture made him seem as if he bore the weight of the world on his frail shoulders. Plus, he was literally an unknown to anyone in the organized crime circle, and apparently had his own financial issues and, more importantly, owned property up in Northern California with an old secluded family home. The perfect place for the four to hide out until it was safe enough for them to all go their separate ways and enjoy an early retirement. Damon, in return for providing them with the untraceable sanctuary, only asked for enough to settle his own personal debt, which was next to nothing compared to what they had in the trunk. The long drive had taken, as Damon had predicted, just shy of an hour before they passed through the town's border and were turning off Route 299 and onto a lightless graveled road that guided them into a dark, heavily wooded area.
When was the last time you were up here? Oh, I guess around 3 or 4 months ago. The house was left to me after my folks died. My grandparents lived there before them. Been in my family for generations. A nice-sized house with enough room for the 4 of us to hole up in without being up each other's asses. There's also 10 acres of property, too, so we'll be in total seclusion. Perfect. If you plan on taking a stroll, just be mindful of sinkholes.
Sinkholes?
A female voice replied. Keezer turned to see that the couple were now awake in the back seat.
Yeah,
continued Damon.
Back in the early 1900s, a chromium mine was dug on the property, before my grandparents acquired the land. Probably why they got it so cheap. Anyway, the mines have been closed and abandoned for ages now. but the mine shafts run all under the property, and in some places sinkholes form where the tunnels were too close to the surface. Just pay attention if you're out here wandering around."
Satisfied, the couple only nodded and stared out the windows. Damon doubted if they were even aware of what chromium was as he peered at them in the rearview mirror. The road continued forward for almost 500 more yards before the house came into view in the car's headlights. The facade of the old two-storied American craftsman-style home was dark and foreboding upon its initial appearance, as it was basked in the car's headlights, with its low-pitched gabled roof and full porch and tapered columns which covered the entryway.
Charming,
Alyssa said sarcastically upon its sight. Mark chuckled at the statement.
Yeah, I can already picture the cozy accommodations.
"We're not here for cozy accommodations, are we?"
Keezer cut in as he turned to the couple and glared. Neither responded. Damon stopped the car in front of the porch stairs and climbed out.
"The trunk is open. I'm going to open the house up,"
he said, as he walked toward the porch stairs. Still glaring at the couple, Keezer added,
"You two can bring in the bags."
Damon unlocked the front door and already turned on some lights on the first floor when they walked into the living room.
"Okay then, there are 2 bedrooms downstairs and 2 more upstairs,"
he narrated as he gestured with his hands.
"There's a bathroom down the hall and one at the end of the hall upstairs. Make yourselves at home. We're going to be here for a while. John, can I get you a drink?"
Sure. Where do you want the loot?
Asked Mark as he held one of the large black duffel bags in his hand.
Leave it by the stairs. I'll take care of that. We'll go through it all tomorrow,
Keezer said over his shoulder as he followed Damon into the kitchen. Mark scoffed under his breath and dropped the bag at the foot of the staircase.
I'm gonna check out upstairs and pick us out a bedroom. You coming?
He smiled and kissed Alyssa on the neck, pushing her long strawberry blonde hair off her shoulders.
Get the one with the biggest bed,
she replied with a smile and ran her fingers gently over his face.
I'm going to join them for a drink first.
She watched him climb the stairs with the other bag, stuffed with their personal belongings, then proceeded down the hall to the kitchen. Keezer was already seated at a table with an empty glass in front of him. Damon was in the cabinets over the counter, pulling out a bottle and another glass.
Mind if I join you, gentlemen? She
asked, pulling up a chair next to Keezer. Damon looked over his shoulder.
As long as you don't mind whiskey.
That's right up my alley,
she replied as she surveyed the rustic kitchen.
What's that door to?
She pointed to a dark brown wooden door near the stove at the opposite side of the room.
Oh, that?
He placed 2 more glasses on the table and sat across from her.
That is to the basement. I would keep out of there, though.
Why's that? Asked Keezer as Damon poured the whiskey into his glass.
You remember me telling you about the sinkholes?
He began as he leaned over and poured Alyssa's drink.
Well, unfortunately, one opened up down there. When they poured the cement for the floor back in the day, they apparently didn't make it thick enough and a portion of it gave way. Happened a few years ago. Went down there one day and found this hole in the floor. There's no damage to the foundation, but a terrible cold air comes up from it, so I keep the door closed.
Good to know, added Keezer. Damon smiled as he lifted his filled glass and toasted the others.
To a couple of months as bunkies, and then being debt-free.
To retiring in the Cayman Islands before I'm 30.
Alyssa added as she touched her glass to the other 2.
Amen to that,
Keezer replied before he drank.
John,
a voice whispered.
John, wake up.
Keezer sat up abruptly, his eyes sweeping the dark room.
What's wrong?
His voice loud in the still darkness. He felt a hand on his shoulder and heard Damon's voice again.
There's something going on. I heard someone going into the basement. I went upstairs, and both bedrooms are empty. Where's the money?"
Keezer swung his legs off the bed and turned on the lamp resting on the nightstand next to him, grabbing his glasses in the process. Damon was hunched over him, his bent posture even more apparent. Pushing him aside, he knelt on the floor and reached under the bed and felt nothing where the duffel bag should have been.
"Motherfucker!"
he hissed, and bent down even lower and peered under the bed to see clean markings on the dust-covered floorboards where the bags had been pushed under the bed before he had retired for the night. He stood up quickly and scanned the room again in the light.
"I couldn't sleep,"
Damon started nervously.
"and I heard whispering in the kitchen. Then I heard a door open. When I went into the kitchen, I found the basement door wide open. That's when I checked their bedroom and found them gone. The basement is empty too. They must have snuck into the mine shafts below the house. I'll kill them both."
He spat as he grabbed his socks and shoes from across the room and sat on the bed while he donned them, still dressed in his pants and a worn white tank top.
"Why the hell didn't they just use the front door?"
Damon only shrugged at the rhetorical question. A long silver flashlight was in one of his hands.
"Perhaps they thought we wouldn't follow them in the tunnels? Well, if that's what those two fuckers thought, they're going to be in for one hell of a surprise. Come on,"
he said as he finished his last shoe and marched from the bedroom and down the hall into the kitchen. When he entered the room, the light was already on and the basement door, as Damon had said, was ajar. He stood at the top of the stairs leading into the basement and peered down the flight of warped wooden stairs. A light was already on downstairs, casting a dim glow. Quickly, he descended the stairs with the aid of a slightly loose handrail, with Damon close behind him. The air temperature beneath the house dropped noticeably as he reached the cellar floor. The basement itself was confined by its low ceiling, causing Keezer to stoop down as he walked onto the cement flooring. A single bulb that dangled from its hanging socket drooped from a fixed support beam. Old rusted cast iron piping ran along the ceiling, making movement in the already squat room even more cautious. The area was cleared of the usual rubbish that inhabits most cellars, and a hole in the floor quickly caught Keezer's eye. It was near the corner of the cellar furthest from the staircase. Slowly he moved closer, careful to avoid overhanging pipes. The hole was obviously caused by a cave-in and was roughly 3 feet in diameter. The sinkhole was far enough from the foundation where there was no damage to the solid mortared stone walls. As he crept closer to the pit, Damon scurried to his side and turned on the electric light, pointing its beam into the black hole.
"You can see their shoe marks as they slid down,"
he said as he illuminated the acute angle going downward a good 8 to 10 feet into a parallel tunnel below.
"And look there."
He moved the beam of light to the base of the decline, exposing a $100 bill partially trodden into the dark soil. Keezer clenched his teeth at the evidence.
"Stay right here,"
he said as he turned from the hole and made his way to the stairs.
"Where are you going?"
"To get my gun." And with that, he was walking heavily back up into the house. Upstairs, Keezer advanced from the kitchen and into the bedroom he was occupying. Though the anger in him was growing by the second, he tried to keep a leveled head about the whole situation. The balls on those two to run off with everything. If they had taken a reasonable portion and hauled ass, that would have been a lessened blow to them. But to take the whole fucking score and sneak off into the mines assuming he wouldn't follow them? Once in the bedroom, he shoved his hand beneath his pillow and emerged with a 9mm Ruger handgun, which he quickly crammed into his waistband. Turning from the bed, he made his way back to the basement door. When he found those two, there would be hell to pay. Mark was unaware of the cellar door, but unlike Alyssa, she was right there in the kitchen with them when Damon mentioned it. He tried not to concentrate on the two just yet. It only made his retribution more violent when he did. As he plodded down the wooden stairs, the draft of cold air, presumably from the hole as Damon had suggested, could be felt immediately.
Okay, Damon. You go in first since you have the flashlight.
His words ceased as he saw that he was alone in the basement. Damon was absent from the room. The only thing pertaining to him was the discarded flashlight laying at the edge of the hole. Its beam was still on, brightening a section of the wall.
Damon? Damon?
He pulled the handgun from his waistband and crept closer to the hole in the floor.
Damon!
He called out louder. With the weapon pointed in front of him, he carefully took a knee and picked up the flashlight with his free hand. Standing up, he inched closer to the edge, aiming both the gun and light into the pit. He paused and listened. Not a sound emitted from below.
Damon!
He shouted down into the shaft. He could hear his voice echoing slightly in the tunnel. He cursed under his breath and began to crawl down into the hole. As he made his way down into the collapse, the potent smell of rich earth filled his nostrils and a chilled breeze from somewhere unknown caressed his exposed flesh. After slipping and sliding a few feet, he reached the floor of a mine shaft. The way behind him was sealed off from the sinkhole collapsing, so the only way to continue was forward. The tunnel was narrow and squatted, the ceiling above him only somewhat higher than that of the basement. The beam of light guided him forward through the dark passage, which continued mostly straight with a small degree of bends and side passages. He noticed, though, that the tunnel was sloping downward at a gradual grade. Every several paces or so, he called out their names and stopped for a few seconds, awaiting a reply. As he continued along, he thought of Damon and what had caused his disappearance. Keezer had only been in the bedroom for the briefest of moments. Hardly enough time for the man to follow him up and go elsewhere in the house without being noticed. The thought of him abandoning the flashlight and going ahead into the pitch blackness was also not a believable answer. Had Mark and Alyssa become lost in the succession of tunnels and backtracked to the entrance into the basement and unexpectedly run into Damon? Nothing made sense at this point. Not the two stealing from him or attempting to escape into the mines, nor the disappearance of Damon. Nothing. The sound of stones falling in the dark ahead jarred him from his debating thoughts. He pointed the beam of light further ahead of him at the sudden noise. The narrow tunnel had ended some 50 feet ahead and opened it to something larger. The gun was again pointed in front of him as he stepped out of the tunnel and into a larger, deeper passage. This one was without a doubt the main shaft, with its enormous wooden beams bracing the walls and ceiling at intervals along the way. The decades of moisture and mold blackened the beams. Rusted cart rails and wood ties ran down the center of the shaft floor. Only portions of the laid-out railway were visible underneath the dirt. He called out their names again and listened. A tomb-like silence answered back his echoes. He flashed a light in both directions, determining which way to continue, when his name was called in the darkness.
John.
A deep groaning voice called out from somewhere in the blackness.
Hello?
He spun in one direction, and then the opposite.
Hello? John.
The drawn-out moan came again, and this time Keezer concluded that it came from behind him, deeper within the mine. He called out all 3 names as he moved further into the shaft, and again there was no reply. He had moved down the earthen passage a good 100 yards, passing half a dozen intersections of tunnels, when the sound of something moved far ahead of him in the dark, as if someone was scurrying across the dirt. He again lifted the light's beam further ahead of him and glimpsed a shape dart deeper into the tunnel's blackness. He froze at the sudden and unexpected sight. He swallowed hard as he realized that the shape was not one of the 3 he had arrived with. The person he had seen was without clothing and beyond pale. It was bent extremely forward, almost moving on all 4s. Cautiously, he continued to move forward, his finger resting lightly on the gun's trigger. As he took each step, a new thought was being evoked within his mind. The image of Damon's poor posture came to mind, and he now wondered if perhaps all 3 of them were collaborating against him. Had they all schemed up a plot to eliminate him? Was he being lured deeper into the mines at their discretion? He had only taken Damon's word about Mark and Alyssa not being in their room. Was it possible that Damon somehow hid in the shadows of the basement when he went upstairs, waiting for him to venture down into the mine alone? He stopped and pondered his predicament. The fear of the voices and the shape being swept aside momentarily as only being a planned diversion created by the others.
John!
The groaning voice called out again. It seemed closer this time. His steps quickened, and he moved forward to the direction of the voice. After only a few dozen steps, the main shaft ended abruptly. The railway seemed to stop at a dead end of stone and earth. To the left and right of the dead ending, smaller passages similar to the one he initially entered when leaving the basement led gradually down at descending angles into unknown depths. Frustration and anger were germinating inside of him as he debated whether to continue with this folly or backtrack to the basement and see if the house was truly empty. Something scurried about in the darkness to his left, and he turned the beam in that direction, again catching another glimpse of the hairless shape as it retreated into the darkness.
I see you, motherfucker!
Keezer shouted. He was tempted to blindly squeeze off around down the passage, but instead he hurried down the tunnel in pursuit.
I'm on to you 3. God help the first one I find!
His labored breaths were sucking in the cold air of the mine's deepness as he squeezed down through the narrow passage, still hurrying forward. It was then that his foot caught a protruding stone, and he stumbled hard to the ground, knocking the light from his hand and his glasses from his face. He laid there in the cold dark, his face resting on the cold dirt. He waited there a moment longer, letting both his breathing and anger subside. When he felt both ebb from him, he carefully extended his hand and felt along the ground until his fingers brushed against the frame to his glasses. He then crawled to his knees and looked ahead. The right lens to his eyeglasses had suffered a long crack. The flashlight had gone out in the fall, and its whereabouts were now unknown, but the gun had luckily remained in his hand. He expected to see nothing but a void of darkness when he looked ahead, but instead a distant flickering of light was visible, the light of some open flame. Making his way to his feet, he trudged forward, not bothering to locate the flashlight. As he drew closer, the light became more distinct, and he could now see that it seemed to be illuminating from somewhere around the corner a distance away. He thought of calling out their names as he stepped nearer, but decided against it. If they were here with him now, he wanted no form of introduction when he found them. As he made his way closer, The way in front of him became more visible with each step. He could taste the particles of dirt in his mouth from the fall and quietly spit as he walked. He saw now that the passage continued further ahead and that the firelight was coming from another passage to his right. He paused and gradually peered around the corner. A primitive torch wedged into a crevice in the wall marked this side passage, revealing the narrow tunnel to extend deeper into the earth. Keezer was preparing to pull the torch loose and use it as light in this darkened realm, but saw that a similar torch was lit further down the way. He left it and continued down the new passage. How long had he been down in these catacombs, he wondered. He glimpsed at his wrist and recalled his watch still resting up in the bedroom on the nightstand. It seemed as if he were wandering about for hours in this dark labyrinth. At the second torch, an area beyond opened into a chamber. The subterranean space stretched back to where a throne-like chair crudely carved from stone sat at its far wall. Torches similar to the others were set in the wall on either side of the chair. The two torches kept the far end of the chamber illuminated, but left the rest of the room shrouded in shadows. Keezer paused at the threshold of the area and ran his eyes over the scene. There appeared to be no exit from the room besides the way he had entered. The chamber stretched back a good 100 feet and was about 15 feet wide. Upon seeing no movement, he cautiously stepped inside. For whatever reason, the need to call out for the others seemed prohibited, as if he had entered a sacred and silent domain such as a church or library. The place held a sensation of some soundless sanctuary. He stepped further into the chamber. With his weapon still at the ready, he crept toward the stone chair. The faint stench of decay and rot lingered in the chilled air. Though the entrance to the room was without the full radiance of the torch's flames, he could make out black holes spaced out in the floor at the base of the walls to his left and right, roughly the size of city manholes. As he crept closer, he noticed that along the walls to his sides, elongated cubbyholes or shelves had been carved out. Rectangular-looking spaces that reminded him of the sleeping arrangements in berthing compartments back when he was much younger and enlisted in the Navy. Sailors stacked 3 high on bunk beds to accommodate their numbers in cramped quarters. These compartments were all too similar and started waist high and went to the chamber's ceiling some 12 feet above him. He counted 6 recesses per row and approximately 6 rows on each wall. He paused again as he thought he heard something moving behind him in the passage he had just come from. When it did not repeat itself, he moved closer to a row of the compartments, for there appeared to be darkened shapes in each. Avoiding the pits in the floor at his feet, he inched closer to one row and gasped as a flicker of light exposed the shape for a brief moment. It was a skeletal husk of a body. To his horror, each recess contained a similar dead object. Some were nothing more than bones, while others still possessed portions or all of their dried, decayed flesh. Rotten cadavers in various stages of decomposition rested in each nook. Keezer reeled backwards, nearly stepping into a pit hole.
Mark! Alyssa!
He finally called out, no longer acknowledging the feeling of a hushed atmosphere.
Damon! They are here, Jonathan.
A voice near him spoke. Keezer spun around at the sudden presence of another and turned to the throne. The stone seat, which was seconds ago vacant, now seated a figure in a black hooded robe. Its head was bowed slightly, the face of the figure hidden behind a drooping cowl. Instinctively, Keezer raised the gun at the figure.
Who the hell are you? Where's those other cocksuckers? All in good time,
it calmly replied.
Where the hell did you come from anyway?
Keezer's eyes rapidly scanned the end of the room near the throne for a doorway he may have missed earlier. There was none.
Your concern should be where you are. One rarely enters here willingly.
Keezer's head turned from side to side, looking again at the rows of dead bodies lying in the wall. He stepped closer to the figure in the chair, his weapon still pointing at it, even though his hand slightly trembled.
Who the fuck are you? Where did you come from?
Cautiously, he inched closer.
Like the others, you have also willingly decided to join us tonight. We bid you welcome, Jonathan.
We? He asked, as a puzzled look formed on his face. Not looking up, the figure gestured with one hand to Keezer's side. The nails on the hand were pointed and caked in filth. Keezer slowly turned, and as he did, he could hear multiple movements coming from behind him. His very breath seemed to be vacuumed from his lungs as he saw what was transpiring behind him. Standing at the entrance to the room were the pale, hunched humanoids he had glimpsed in the tunnels. A dozen of them, bent over and swaying in anticipation. The naked horrors were hairless, their skin smooth and glistening in appearance. Their heads were slightly larger and contorted than that of a normal human. The heads of these abominations were lipless, displaying blackened gums filled with long pointed teeth, and were absent of eyes. It was as if they had grown a membrane of skin over them, leaving only 2 indentations under the flesh. As he looked on, more of these horrid creatures were crawling from the holes in the floor. Keezer stepped away from the blocked entrance.
You see,
said the figure.
We are all here together.
Keezer spun back around and faced the figure.
Where am I? What the hell is this place?
His voice trembled, as did his hands.
By entering this sacred place, your fates have already been chosen for each of you.
What do you mean?
Observe.
And with another gesture of its hand, the mass of creatures parted, making way for another. Keezer moved backward to a corner near the throne as the creature larger than the others moved forward. It stood a good foot taller than the others and was more muscular. It wasn't until it had approached the stone chair that he could see that it was dragging a body behind it. It was Mark. His body had been stripped of clothing, and Keezer had assumed he was dead until the enormous creature dropped him to the floor. It then grabbed him by the back of his neck and lifted him up in the air. Mark let out a moan.
That's enough! Put him down!
Keezer directed the gun at the creature. It turned its misshapen head and faced him.
That trinket you put all your strength into will do no good here,
the bowed head stated. Keezer squeezed the trigger in rapid succession. Each time the firing pin struck at nothing, letting the hammer click harmlessly. He turned the gun over and saw that there was no magazine in the handle. His jaw fell open. How long had he toted the empty weapon? As Keezer stared dumbfounded at the useless weapon in his hand, the figure rose from the chair and stepped toward the body dangling by the creature's hand. Reaching out with its hand, the figure gently caressed Mark's lower abdomen with the tips of its pointed fingernails, and before Keezer could react, thrust its hand into the soft flesh. The sharp talons pushed through the abdominal muscles until the figure's entire hand was inside the body. Mark gagged at the action, and blood poured from the gaping wound as his body twitched spasmodically. The creature clasped the body's neck tightly as the hooded figure forcefully withdrew its hand, pulling with it a handful of pink intestines. Keezer screamed and fell to his knees. The figure stepped backwards to the throne, still holding onto the man's innards as they continued to extend from the wound in a cascade of blood that splashed upon the ground. Once the figure had returned to its seat, the intestines still clutched in its hand, it dropped the rope of entrails to the dirt floor. Keezer screamed even louder.
Fear not, Jonathan. Your son's miserable life was not taken in vain. Only by death could he atone.
With that said, the figure in black waved him away, and in response, the large creature turned to the horde behind it and tossed the naked, bloodied body at the feet of the creature's peers. They swiftly fell upon it in a famished frenzy. Keezer could no longer look upon the gruesome desecration of his only son, and covered his face, falling to his knees as he wailed. Though he spared himself the grisly visual nightmare that was taking place, the sound of the rending flesh, slurping of liquids, and cracking of bones as the horde feasted painted an all too vivid mental horror. When the sounds of their devouring had finally ceased, Keezer slowly and reluctantly raised his head. His face was streaked with trails from dried tears. The massive creatures was no longer in the chamber, apparently retreating into their deep subterranean lairs after they had filled their bloated stomachs with human flesh. Only a crimson pool remained as a reminder of what had taken place. Small chunks and strips of discarded flesh and bone lay scattered in the puddle of gore. Standing at the throne's side stood the creature, its eyeless face facing him. The figure in black also remained in its seat, back in its original posture and bowed head.
Are you ready to understand now, Jonathan?
I'm going to kill you,
he spat from quivering lips. The figure chuckled at the threat.
How amusing that you actually believe that statement.
It then pointed to the front of the room.
Our guest needs yet another lesson.
In response, the creature turned and lumbered to the entrance. Keezer watched as it shambled past and stopped in front of one row of corpses. Though it could not see, its head tilted up and down as if looking for something, then groped into one of the higher recesses and pulled out a limp form. Gently, it lifted it from the space and carried it back to the stone chair. As it came back into the torchlight, Keezer saw that it was Alyssa. She too had been stripped of all her clothing as the thing dropped her in the bloody pool of butchery. Her naked body splashed as it fell into the blood, and she too moaned out loud.
Please, no more, please.
Keezer, now drained of any fight, pleaded.
Watch, and perhaps, just perhaps, you will realize where you are.
The figure nodded, and the creature reacted. It moved to Alyssa and stood over her nude form, then rolled her onto her stomach and began to straddle her. Her face remained partially hidden by her long hair as it poked out of the mass of strawberry blonde. Keezer covered his mouth in revulsion as he saw that a severed, rotten dead hand had been crammed into her mouth. The cadaverous appendage was held in place by a copper wire that had been wrapped tightly across her face. The wire wound so tight that it dug into her flesh like a roast wrapped in string. Even more ghastly was the fact that someone had removed her eyes, leaving black holes in her face. Keezer wept again behind clenched teeth at the sight as the creature forcefully penetrated between her legs and began thrusting violently into her. She cried out in muffled anguish. Keezer's mental limit had now reached its end, and he decided it was now time to act before Damon was soon pulled forth and subjected to another form of heinous torture and death. His mind was teetering on the brink of insanity as he witnessed a madness not meant for mortal eyes. With no warning given, he jumped to his feet and sprinted to the entrance. The grunting of the creature as it continued its assaultive beastly intercourse still in his ears.
There is no way out there,
the figure called out before it burst into laughter. As Keezer ran through the chamber, he could hear the clawed scurrying of the horde rising from their holes. Racing from the chamber, he hurried blindly through the narrow passage until his foot kicked the lost flashlight from earlier. The impact of his foot somehow turning the light back on. With hardly breaking a stride, he scooped up the light as he ran and continued until he emerged in the main shaft. Behind him, he could hear the creatures in close pursuit. Aimlessly, with fear driving his body beyond its physical limitations, Keezer continued running in an exhausted, plodding manner as he moved through the endless catacombs. It wasn't until the beam of light caught a glitter in the soil near him that he stopped suddenly and bent to examine the object. It was a single diamond. He looked up and saw that it lay at the mouth of another indistinguishable passage. A flicker of light forced a smile onto his tormented face, and he laughed out loud. Blind luck had taken him to the passage leading back to the basement. Wasting no time, he hurried into the narrow tunnel. Within a few minutes, the end of the collapsed tunnel came into view, the light from the basement above illuminating the exit. Keezer tossed the flashlight away and scrambled up the slope. Above him, he could make out the wood beams and iron piping in the basement ceiling of the house. He laughed out loud again at his good fortune. Gripping the rim of the hole, he struggled as his arms pulled him upward. Throwing his elbows out on the edge of the hole, he lifted his upper body out. It was then he froze. He found himself back in that chamber of the dead, crawling from one of the holes in the floor. His lips quivered as he looked upon the rows of decayed bodies in front of him.
Now this is a heartwarming sight,
the hooded figure called from its seat as it wrung its clawed hands in jubilation. Keezer felt his body going limp, and the horde of creatures were now grasping at him and pulling him from the hole, taking seizure of him. He was being taken toward the throne.
Now for a taste of things to come,
Damon said with a beaming smile as he pushed the cowl from his head. Keezer screamed as his sanity abandoned him. And that was Ossuarium by our old pal Frederick Pangborn. A good reminder that if you happen to come across a chamber full of bodies, you're definitely not the first one to get there. A little about the author. Frederick Pangborn was a short story author with over 100 stories to his credit, and the majority of them in publication. He was a retired law enforcement officer and former U.S. Marine. And again, special thanks to his brother Robert Pangborn, who's partnered with us to keep Frederick's legacy going. Old Robert himself is an amazing artist who we hope you'll check out. You can find him on Facebook at RF Pangborn. That's simply spelled P-A-N-G-B-O-R-N. Check the show notes for a link to his Instagram. His paintings are genuinely horrifying. Thanks, Robert, and thanks, Fred. Gone but not forgotten.
And do old Drew Blood a favor, would you? Subscribe to his podcast wherever you do your listening and leave him a 5-star review and a kind word, even if you're listening on YouTube. He needs soldiers on all fronts to win this battle, and he appreciates it. To hear a premium ad-free edition of tonight's and all the other episodes, visit simplyscarypodcast.com today and click Patrons in the upper menu. You'll find yourself at chillingtalesfordarknights.com, where you can become a patron for as little as $5 per month and get access to their entire audio archive, all ad-free and available to download or stream. Thank you for your time and for supporting our sponsors. When you support our sponsors, you support this show. If you happen to use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube, you can follow and subscribe to Chillin' Tales for Dark Nights there, where you'll get all the latest updates and new releases and have the chance to interact with them each and every week. Oh, and you can find Drew Blood on Facebook and Instagram, and sometimes Twitter. The Drew Blood's Dark Tales podcast is accepting submissions, friend. If you've got a story or two you'd like to be featured on the show, send it to drewbloodhorror@gmail.com. If selected, you'll get the full treatment, 10 bananas.
Well, I'm afraid this is where we part ways, at least till next week. So grab a drink for the road, friend. We're shoulder to shoulder with our international workers today, and that means one thing: siesta time. So may the wind be at your back, and may the road rise up to meet you. Hit that like button on your way out, would you? And remember, patreon.com/Drew Blood. It'll cure what ails you. And until next time, y'all, go fuck yourselves. Good night, friends. Good night.